What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 13th session of DNegs versus Doug Polk. Sorry to get to you a little bit late here. We had some audio issues, but we are ready to rock. I'm joined today by the other Matt, my main man, Matt, mental health Matt.
Apparently that's what they're calling me these days.
Okay.
It might be self-designed, but that's what they're calling me.
I think it's a good thing. I'm happy to see you branching off into other things.
Been fun.
And in the early goings of this, I think we can talk about it a little bit because, it's unlikely. Well, hey, I don't know with these guys. Maybe they'll just come out swinging. But
maybe they will.
Last match started off kind of slow and ended very poorly for one of these players.
Yeah, so from what I can tell from that graphic there, I thought that Doug was up like 270K. I guess I missed the session somewhere because he's up 600K now.
Yeah, he won 330 last session.
Wow.
It was brutal. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but Negreanu put out a recap video yesterday. Which I'm sure was a little bit to appease his own ego, which has to be a bit bruised at this point. But it was also just hilarious. It reminded me of the old Tough Fish videos. He just went through the biggest hands of the session and was like, okay, so here we go. We got Jack 6, flop 2 pair. That's pretty good for us. We're going to check raise, and then the turn is this, and yada yada. And backdoor hearts come through, but he's not going to have a flush. And okay, it's king high flush. And it was like 25 hands like that, where he literally just had top of range nutted type of distribution, and Doug just had him pipped.
Wow. So Daniel just got cooled off relentlessly, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, that's not to say that he didn't make errors. Obviously, we don't get to see the whole card, so it's pretty difficult to know. But this video, this highlight video that he did was a solid 5 minutes long, and I would imagine he was able to pack in maybe 15 hands. That's a lot of 200 big blind pots.
That's a lot of punishment. Yeah, if you're just getting cooled off 15 times in a 4-hour session for lots of money, that's pain. That's some real pain right there.
Whoa, this has to be a misclick. This absolute. Well, I mean.
But how could it be?
Right.
Because a misclick would mean he was trying to raise to 11. Yeah, that's just got to be like a huge raise. Wow. right away, that is.
Yeah, nuts. I don't know that Daniel's going to have many 7x pot calls there. I'm also not sure that he's very well developed. I mean, the thing is it's kind of Pluribus-like, right? Or maybe even like Liberatus-like. I guess we saw a little bit there. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty difficult to calibrate what your calling range is supposed to be in that spot. We know it's supposed to be full houses. We can start there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's difficult, I think, to parse through. And I missed the board texture. I wasn't expecting there to be a massive blast.
Well, we went to the river with 5 big blinds in the pot. Suddenly, Daniel bets 2 into 5, and Doug's raising to 60 big blinds. That was a pretty crazy hand. Or not 60, but 30, I guess. So yeah, already firing off some action. I guess there's been a bunch of big pots already.
I wonder. We have a big pot brewing here on the right.
Yeah.
As Doug is raising Daniel's river lead. Didn't quite catch the action up to that point. He does get the fold. I wonder if I know Daniel's using a piece of software that converts everything into big blinds. I think it's Table Tamer, or maybe there's another one. Zoom or something like that. I wonder if they're running any sort of software that allows them to calibrate their bet size. Because the WSOP client only has half pot, quarter pot, full pot.
It has the simplest ones, right? So I think that. Oh, are they opening up a third table?
Oh wow, Andre just coming through in the clutch. The man has all the bells and whistles. We're looking at a replay here.
It's a replay. Wow.
Of that
okay.
Most recent pot where Doug found a raise on the river, and that makes a lot of sense. He's going to have a lot of 8x as played for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
That was Andre. I like that. I like that a lot, man.
That was great.
Okay. Yeah, we'll have to lean on that in the future. We have a 3-bet on both sides here. Doug doing the 3-betting on the left, Daniel on the right. Daniel folds the left, Doug calls the right. Not a great texture for our out of position player here. I expect Daniel's going to be doing a lot of Checking. Okay. He beat me to it. Do you think he's doing much range betting? I mean, obviously not. He checked here, but do you think he's doing a high percentage of betting on a texture like this?
I mean, I haven't seen a ton of the match so far, so I'm not 100%, clued in on what kind of strategies Daniel's been adopting. But I would think it's pretty hard to get away with too many like binary strategies in heads up cash, right? I mean, you're dealing with one of the most complex forms of the game, and if Daniel was going out there and just like c-betting range on every board or on certain boards or something like that, you have to think that Doug would probably pick up on it pretty quickly. So I doubt he's going to be doing too much of that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just speaking a little bit more into the hypothetical realm. So we do see Daniel check call flop. Doug then checks back the turn, which makes sense. This is probably going to be a brick for all intent and purposes. So I imagine we're going to see a lot of showdown value in Doug's range. Potentially with spades. I would expect Daniel to be doing a little bit of blocking here, which he does choose to do.
Yeah.
And I would imagine that this is going to include, I don't think he has any other bet size here, to be quite frank.
It's very hard to, it's very hard to imagine Daniel finding some way to kind of pull out here, just given that his range is perceived to be really capped. He doesn't possess a ton of spades. He doesn't possess a ton of 4x. He doesn't possess really much 8-9 or anything like that. So he just doesn't have a lot in range that can justify betting large for value. And obviously when that's the case, it's also hard to bet large as a bluff.
Yeah, and I think that's something we talk about a lot, actually, both in homeschool and the academy, is it's very difficult to go from equity realization or the passive portion of the game tree into polarization. It's just a very non-intuitive shift that isn't really possible. So he could just have nuts on river, of course. He could have a hand like ace jack of spades that he check called and river the nuts. But that's not really what we're talking about. Just because he can have portions of top of range, which would allow him to bet, say, 2x pot there. He doesn't really have the complementary bluffs that make logical sense. And it's just really difficult to arrive at a balance there. So I think the block bet makes the most sense in that instance. And he's just going to be very well protected in the sense that he'll have some block 3-bet bluffs with like the ace of spade. And then he'll have some like just nutted hands that are blocking to induce a raise that can get it all in.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too is that when you're still at a pretty deep SPR on the river, it's often kind of hard to justify putting in large bets, because then you have the weird scenario where you bet large with theoretically a polarized range, but then there's still enough bets left for you to get raised, right? And your opponent, you have to figure out like how polarized are they in that raising range, because it should be extremely polarized. But when you're actually at a pretty deep SPR, there's room for maybe some thin value raises to come in, even versus some pretty large bets. So you get into weird scenarios when you're on the river with 10 or 15 to 1 SPR still left behind, because there's a lot of weird stuff that can happen there. And I think that the small bet at least makes it makes it a little bit easier to understand what a response should be when you do get raised, and to construct appropriately when it comes to bluff catches and potentially some 3-bet jams in Daniel's spot in that situation.
Yeah, I think all that's very valid. Just doubling back to what you were saying, you're not really sure of like the strategies that they're employing. What we've seen is that Doug is employing a much wider range or a much broader spectrum of bet sizings. Daniel's mostly been 20% or 75%. Obviously, when he's 20%ing, he's pretty simplified there to just range betting. And it's leading to him, at least in my observation, and to be fair, I think that this is corrected over the last couple matches, but it had led to him arriving at river in big pots with a lot of check folds. So there was a lot of 3-betting and 4-betting taking place. Daniel would then, 20% on flop in spots where ranges were already super narrow and you're just not going to earn a lot of folds. And then, ultimately arrive at a checking turn or check back of turn and land on river with a check fold or just give up of some sort. How much, you're our resident solver guy. How much do you think complicating the early portion of the game tree, such as flop c-bet strategies, helps carve out EV versus somebody who's attempting to employ a simple counter?
I think what it comes down to is how much do you know about the types of weaknesses that they're going to exhibit, right? Because if you're looking at a heads up match like this, like it's very possible Doug in particular is looking at it as like, I just want to try to play somewhat close to GTO, but the longer the match goes on, the more that each of them is going to start looking for exploits. And I think that when you are looking for additional exploits, you want to think of it in terms of what type of strategy they're expecting, and then what type of strategy can I employ that is somewhat unexpected, but without going to the point where I lose track of what I'm doing, right? Where I lose track of how complicated the game tree is going to get. So it seems to me like it would be a matter of kind of towing the line of adding complexity in those areas, like the flop c-bet strategies and things like that, where maybe maybe the other player might not expect it very much, but at the same time, like whoever's doing it has to be pretty aware of exactly what adaptation they're making. They can't just like start throwing out random bet sizes and expect it to be effective. It's probably a very tricky process in a match this long, I would guess.
Well, the assumption is that Doug is very studied in these bet sizes. He's not just haphazardly choosing them.
Sure.
And Daniel had to play a lot of catch up. So the easiest way to do that was to kind of begin with a couple bet sizes. I think we are starting to see a bit of an evolution. He utilized 40% a little bit last session.
Okay.
So we saw a river overbet here a few hands ago. He seems to be doing a little bit more of that. But just to touch on the idea of complicating c-bet strategies, I do think that what you find when you study game theory, and particularly our limited, I guess, scope of it via PO and our inputs and things of that nature, is that the more willing you are to be versatile on flop strategies, so essentially the more competent you are in a wider array of betting strategies, the more margin of error it feels like you are able to accrue. So we see Daniel pick up a nice little pot here with what ultimately proved to be third pair. The more margin of error you're able to accrue on the later streets. Whereas the person who simplifies early has to be incredibly dialed in and precise now with the later street play, because generally that simplification comes with wide ranges being carried forward onto future streets, right? And my best observation is that's what Doug has done a fantastic job of, outside of running above EV as well. He's put Daniel in a lot of really awkward flop spots by utilizing different bet sizes that I think Doug is pretty inherently familiar with what Daniel should be continuing with versus said sizes. And it's leading to Daniel either maybe being a little bit too wide on later streets, or potentially a little bit too tight. And eventually what ultimately happens is they reach an apex where the person who is most confidently implementing their strategy has the other person kind of like defending.
Yeah. And then you're going to get spots where the biggest edges are going to be able to be gained through one player or the other, effectively being able to manipulate their opponent into spots where their river range becomes unbalanced. They're going to be able to manipulate it into a scenario where somebody's going to overfold or underfold dramatically, and somebody's going to, underbluff against a certain sizing or something like that. And the player that's going to be able to capture the most margins through those exploits is going to be the one that has the greatest capacity to kind of figure out on the fly what sorts of over adaptations and mistakes they're going to be able to engineer through these unusual bet sizings that the other player might not be able to really get a handle on right away.
Right. And an easy example of that is just Doug 2x pots flop. The response to that isn't inherent. It's not going to be intuitive by any stretch. So everything from that decision on is going to compound the more studied that Doug is in that spot versus Daniel. Oh,
definitely. Yeah. And that kind of 2x pot line, like it's hard to prepare for, because when you're dealing with flops and you have a lot of SPR still left to play, like you can't prepare for every possible sizing, because you can prepare for maybe a more generically polarized approach to the flop. You can prepare for maybe a larger sizing as a whole, but it's hard to simultaneously be able to prepare for 2/3, 3/4, full pot, 1.5x, 2x, things like that. And I saw when I was doing analysis of Pluribus and the types of like really out there, like crazy flop strategies Pluribus was implementing at certain times, like the humans that were forced to respond to some of these really outlandish sizings, that you could tell that they were being forced into positions that were uncomfortable for them, because there were some really unusual decisions in those spots. Like there were people like flop comes ace jack 4 and the player has ace 5, and the pluribus goes 1.5x pot on the flop, and ace 5 just like folds on on ace jack 4 and stuff. So some pretty out there decisions were occurring when these sizings crept in, because you just can't prepare for that very easily.
Yeah, and for anybody who's interested, Matt did a wonderful series for us on Software TV. It's Man vs. Machine, I believe season 2.
It was season 2, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, where he broke down all of the pluribus hands and basically dug in a little bit deeper into some of these weird strategies that it was employing, and just how counterintuitive the response often is for the human in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, it was really eye-opening to, first of all, to see the kind of strategies that the bot arrived at, just through these iterations, or this like sort of trial and error playing against itself sort of approach that it took, but also just to put myself in that position and to think about like, okay, well, if I was trying to figure out like how should I actually respond in this spot, if I was in this scenario, some of those spots are just so tough. And in many ways, the essence of poker is just being able to put your opponents in tough spots, and one way or another, the bot found a way to just do that a lot.
Yeah, I think that is, I think that's the iteration moving forward. We do have a big pot brewing here.
Looks like it.
Right. I missed the action because I was shilling for our site.
Daniel check raised the turn and then check the river.
Okay, fascinating. He's not going to have very much Jack X in his turn check raise line, I don't think, outside of perhaps exactly Queen Jack, Jack 8.
Especially
those hands make sense.
Especially because Doug potted the turn and then Daniel check raised.
Wow, that's fascinating to me. The Jack's not that bad of a card. That Daniel's not just all in, and this is something that we've seen also from a precision standpoint. When those lines occur, Doug check raising the turn, whatever the case may be, either he's run really well with what the river was, or he just always follows through with that shove. Whereas like Daniel, it seems like he's utilizing a lot of 10x there, perhaps. So here we're gonna get a good replay of it. Single raise pot, Jack 8-5.
Check, 40% call.
40% call. Turn is very advantageous here to Daniel. I would think he's going to have a lot of 9-10. He's going to have some Queen Jack. So he does go for a big check raise here. And
check folds.
Now arrives at a check fold. I mean, if he's utilizing like a hand like 6-7 on the turn, that just seems to me to be very poor. So I don't think that's the case. I imagine we're looking at more King 10.
I think that type of stuff, the King 10 could definitely be in there, but I also feel like there's probably at least some hands that Daniel can check raise on the turn with for value, and then fold when he gets counterfeited. Like he could potentially check raise bottom 2 on that turn. It's a bit thin, but in heads up, when he unblocks a lot of the Queen X that he's trying to get called by, like I don't think it's completely out of the question that Daniel could check raise bottom 2. And then of course when the Jack pairs the river, maybe he just feels like he has to fold. But ultimately, it's pretty likely that we are looking a lot of bluffs there that end up folding that river, and it's kind of tough to imagine what those bluffs would be. You would think it would have to contain a 10, just based on the fact that Doug potted the turn, and it's just so difficult to check raise there without a 10. And it could have even been something like bottom pair with a 10, like it could have been 10-5, something like that, 10-5 suited possibly. Wouldn't be a bad candidate.
He's just not going to have a lot of it though. There's only 2 combos of 8-5 suited left, so that's a pretty improbable one. Sure, he'll have a little bit of 10-5. 10-8 seems like you're reaching. It feels like it has enough showdown value.
Definitely, yeah. I think 10-8 would be a bit of a weird check raise there, because it definitely is a bluff catcher that functions well, considering it has outs to the nuts.
Right. So yeah, I'm struggling a little bit to follow. Ace 10, King 10 intuitively makes some sense to me. They feel kind of bad calling, and they do have good properties to be check raising. But if that's the case, I don't know that Doug has a ton of Jack X in his range either. So like when Daniel checks river, I assume that he still has showdown value a lot of the time, expecting to go check and him potentially peel off a winner. Yeah,
it's a strange one, especially. It's funny. Like one of the things I keep wondering
King
about.
10 is a pretty good follow through on the river. You're blocking a lot of King Jack. You're blocking Queen, Jack 10, 10-9.
I think the thing I'm unsure about more than anything is not necessarily what bluffs does Daniel have on the turn, but what bluffs can he rationalize giving up, and on what account is he able to have give ups there? Is he giving up because he thinks that if he bluffs with that combo, he's going to be over bluffing, or is he giving up because he thinks that's a river where Doug is just going to underfold and therefore he's going to have no bluffs and just only have value when he shoves? Like, there's a couple of potential realities there, but at this point in the match,
I do feel like it's a lot more of the latter, and I feel like that's a bit of a problem because I don't think he's getting called on a river shove there at quite as high of a frequency as it may intuitively feel.
Yeah,
because I think Doug is just going to have a lot of equity on the turn. Like, he may be turning 8-10 into a bluff now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when Doug bets full pot on the turn and then calls the raise and then shoves the river, the hard part is, like, because he full potted the turn already, he's not repping like a particularly wide range of value. He's not repping a lot of single jack hands in that spot particularly. There might be some. You could probably justify going thin with ace jack there, but ace jack may be the type of hand which doesn't call the check raise on the turn. And so a lot of the time there, you have to think that when the jack comes on the river, it's actually going to be a brick for a lot of Doug's range. It's not going to be a hand, it's not going to be a card that improves a lot of it outside of stuff that had a set and now has a house. And then the bluffs all miss as well. So it's a very strange spot because Doug's bet call range on the turn becomes slightly more polarized on that river, and then Daniel's range becomes more polarized too. So you'd think that one of them is going to have to shove, and in that case, it looks like Daniel just gave up and Doug got the shove in. But would have been interesting to see if Daniel had shoved there. It feels like Doug should have mostly just snaps and snap folds, snap calls and snap folds, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe I'm misestimating what Doug's range looks like there.
Yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you. I think that the jack was. I'm shocked to not see a shove.
So something interesting that I've been kind of curious about, having not been able to catch too much of the contest so far, but having caught bits and pieces here and there, having seen some of the hands and little bits of footage and stuff like that, is I know Daniel for a long time had this reputation of being a guy who doesn't like to fold rivers, right? So Daniel he was out there on TV for such a long time, like never folding a river for probably 5 years or so. He just seemed to be getting in constant spots where he just paid off and lost the hand. And I'm curious to what extent you think maybe up to this point that reputation that Daniel has might have played into this. Like, do you think that Doug maybe went in with the perception that Daniel might be a bit inclined to just call a bit too much on rivers?
No, I think it's been the exact opposite. Doug has been the payoff by a long shot, and Daniel, in my opinion, has just been insanely too tight on rivers.
Interesting.
He has a wild amount of check folds on rivers, and I think that turn check raise line is a good example of it. I would love to look at the strategy, but on a river jack there, I just don't think we have a lot of give ups with our check raising range versus a polarized pot size betting range. Like, basically, I don't think we're check raising turn expecting a fold or a give up by us. Like, right. I think our strategy isn't really going to function that way. And yeah, just in a general sense, like, it seems like Doug is very willing to go for super thin value on rivers. And he's been earning a lot of folds. He's even, like, there was a hand that was posted a couple days ago where Daniel bet Queen 9 on a river where I believe 10-8 and King 10 possibly both made a straight. Okay. Queen 9 was 2-pair, and Doug had 10-9, so he blocked the two-way straight. Daniel bet 13,000 on the river. Actually, maybe more. He bet 15,000 on the river, and Doug shoved for 38.
Wow. Okay.
So, like, a click, literally a click. He's laying like 5.5, 6 to 1. But he needs bluffs in that spot. He chose the 9-10, and Daniel had a hand strong enough to call off with the Queen 9. But I think that shows the massive difference in risk averse versus risk taking on rivers, and also just like the level of calibration difference. We don't get to see the hands, but just if we looked at sheer river aggression frequency, I'm very, very confident that Doug's is significantly higher than Daniel's. And part of that may just be because he's on the plus end of the distribution. But a lot of it is like Daniel arriving to the river through the aggressive lens and then finding give ups. Yeah,
that's interesting. I think it'll be fascinating to at the end of this, I would assume that someone will go to the effort of categorizing all the hands into poker tracker friendly formats, and we'll be able to pass through them and analyze them and pick things apart. And from the sound of it, it seems like what we would expect to see at the end of it is actually pretty much what we would expect to see from any large scale heads up contest like this, which is that the way that you play the river counts for more than pretty much anything else, right? And if you are making mistakes on rivers, it's very, very hard for that to be made up in some other capacity somewhere else.
Yeah, it's where the base portion of EV is exchanged.
Absolutely. Ooh, what did we get there? That was
Andre, can we replay that one? That was kind of a fascinating showdown where neither of them had anything, and the pot was quite large.
They both had one pair on a 4 flush board.
Right.
And a big pot.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that one if possible. My instincts are that was again a spot where Daniel was aggressive. I'm guessing he 3-bet pre.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. I'm gonna guess that he probably bet 2/3. Yep, or 3/4 rather. Okay.
Check.
That makes sense. Have to bet river.
Check.
Have to bet river.
Oh yeah.
Have to bet river. We don't have worse, I don't think.
Yeah, I don't think so. Very little was like.
Yeah,
you can maybe have some like ace queen without a spade, but like the hands that don't have a spade probably don't bet 2/3 on the flop.
Right.
So I mean, really, I think 5-3 of clubs is a weird candidate to bet 2/3 on flop there. Honestly, it doesn't have a natural route to polarization on a lot of board textures, and I don't even know to what extent. Like I'm not. What's that?
I agree with you, but also it's one of those situations where I feel like it plays pretty poorly as a check call.
Yeah, that's probably true.
So he's just not betting much, and its natural route to polarization would be exactly on that run out by bluffing river.
Yeah, that's true.
Or by turning a 5, of course.
Yeah, turning a 5 is always a nice one.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure.
I think it's like a low frequency polarizing hand. It's probably just going to like shift to a check give up a lot of the time after getting called through. But when we see the 4 flush run out, particularly with 2 high cards, we have a go off, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So like I like the turn check on the jack of spades. I think, at a pretty reasonable frequency, 5-3 is going to get turned into a bluff there on the river. And then I think conversely, when we have some favorable runouts like a turn 5, that becomes one of the hands that we get to polarize because we're probably not betting a lot of other 5s in that spot for 3/4.
Right, and it's also very relevant, I think, for people to understand in that spot that flopping middle pair in a 3-bet pot on 7-5 deuce is incredibly different from flopping middle pair on a board where middle pair is like a 9 or a jack or something like that, right? Where you have a lot more capacity to realize equity with middle pair on those types of boards than you do with middle pair on a low board like that, where most cards that come are going to be overcards and you're going to be put under a lot of pressure pretty much no matter what run out follows up. So there is more justification in that sense, I think, for betting your middle pairs large on those low boards than there is if you were to, if you had 10-9 on jack 10-4 and you started betting large, that starts to become a bit impractical for your range. But on the lower boards, it does make more sense.
Yeah, and this is also a function of being a 3-bet pot. He has all the overpair advantage. Doug isn't going to connect with this board lot because Doug's probably 4-betting 9s plus at a reasonable frequency. And he does block a set of 5s, which is very important. He does have the backdoor straight draws, and I just think like 5-3 probably works pretty nicely as 3/4 pot there. I could see alternatively there being a strategy that is just betting 20-25% there with range, and then just playing out the turn as is. But I think I prefer the line Daniel took all the way up to the river.
What do you think about Doug peeling the 3-bet with Queen 7 suited?
Very standard.
Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward. I'm not particularly clued up on, like, I know a fair amount when it comes to heads up MTT ranges and what's supposed to be calling in certain spots with antes, but with heads up deep stack cash, I'd be lying if I said I was an expert there in terms of what the ranges are supposed to look like. So I think the Queen 7 seems relatively reasonable there, but I wanted to ask just in case you thought it was a little outside the norm, but I guess not.
Yeah, from what I've seen, I think that you'd be surprised how wide ranges truly are, even in aggressive pots. Like even in 4-bet pots, ranges I think tend to be a lot wider than we would.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like I'm by no means a heads-up expert, but
well, if anything, for me, it was more a case of like I thought that I might be overestimating how much impact the antes make, right? So that I thought that I might be thinking of MTT ranges being really wide, but then actually cash heads-up ranges might be tighter than I would expect. But I guess it's just not true. It's just not the case.
The big difference is just that you're almost never playing strictly heads-up in an MTT.
Yeah.
It's still just going to be a button versus blind formation, and that impacts the ranges greatly. So it's probably pretty close to one-to-one comparison. Once you eliminate that third player.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I was thinking more about like the actual end game of an MTT, like a heads up match. Like that's what I mean when I say I'm relatively
But now the ante is
familiar.
very, very small, right?
Well, it depends. If you're playing live, you're still playing big blind ante. You're playing like exactly.
Now we're playing like 100% of hands.
Well, every time I'm talking with you, I'm in like live poker mode, you know. So like I'm always thinking about live poker.
It's been a weird year, man. I'm in these online streets.
I know, right? Like, what's going on? What's going on when I'm thinking about live poker more, and you're out there, you know, playing online, just being an online grinder and streamer and all that.
Got to do it. Gotta adapt. You know, it's very critical these days in the COVID era.
Yeah. How are you handling the whole COVID experience? 8 months in.
Yeah, for me, I definitely had some lulls where I kind of like lost my mind a little bit. I lost all motivation pretty much between October and, or maybe more so like mid-September to like early November, mid-November.
Okay.
But I just think that that's gonna naturally happen whether we're in COVID or not. Like I have a long history with seasonal depression, and like luckily it hasn't happened yet. I actually feel very motivated now. It's nice to have like projects like this to keep me grinding. But yeah, man, I miss live poker. I miss it a lot.
I was gonna say you must, it must kill you to not be able to step out there too much these days.
The thing is, though, when it goes, it's been really good because
that's good.
A lot of the fun players and the VIPs are just itching to get the fuck out of the house.
Yeah.
And so like the games are just like building really quickly.
It's interesting. What do you make of the online traffic on WSOP? I know you've been playing on there on and off.
It was great up until the end of the World Series bracelet series that they ran. It just
the World Series.
Yeah, it fell off a cliff. It just fell off a cliff. I was playing like 50, 100 plus, probably 4 nights a week between May and middle of August, and then it just absolutely fell off a cliff. You couldn't even like really get a consistent 5-10 game.
Wow, that's brutal.
Yeah, I've probably played like maybe 5 to 6 high stakes sessions since then. That's over like what 3-4 month span.
Yeah, but you had some upswings in amongst that, right? Like you had some good days, from what I could tell from group chat. Anyway,
I had a really good. I've had a really good year. It's probably one of my 4 most profitable years ever.
It's funny, like it's now that like I feel like this year, in previous years, it's like because I see you and everybody else pretty regularly. Last couple of years, it's been like I have a pretty good idea at any given moment whether you're having a good year or a bad year or whatever. But this year, it's been like I'll wake up one morning and group chat will be like, "Oh, Berkey won 100K last night," and I'll be like, "What the hell?" Last I heard, he was having a downswing or something, you know. So I feel like I have no idea whether you're winning or losing at any given point. But it sounds like it's been a good year.
Yeah, no, I'm. It's been a very good year. I don't want to give figures, but yeah, like even just on the books, I'm up mid 6 figures. Like as far as like on WSOP goes.
That's pretty good.
So here's our first 4-bet pot. Doug peeling as he does tend to do. We don't see a lot of 5-bet shoves in these matches, to be quite frank. And when we do, it almost always is Polk. Daniel a little bit more aggressive in the 4-betting strategy than Doug from what I've seen. And this is kind of like what I'm talking about. I'll be very interested to see how this works out. To me, this is not a texture where we want to be going with the 20-25% C-bet strategy. I know it's a viable one because, you know, it's 4-bet. Ranges are tight. There isn't really a concern about, you know, allowing your opponent to continue with everything. But it gets weird. We see a small check raise here from Doug. Yeah. So now Daniel's getting laid at this point 6.5 to 1 on a call. He does rip through. Very likely have an overpair. Doug has a snap fold.
I guess
all very standard.
Yeah, it does seem pretty standard. I guess my only sort of interesting, like the thing that I think is interesting there on the flop is just that at that low SPR, what option does Daniel really have other than a very small bet sizing? Because he's at like 1.5 to 1, right? So he's basically choosing between that and just ripping it. And shoving is fine in that spot when you get to deny equity and stuff, but sometimes your range doesn't want to do that. So it's like, basically,
that's
you just have the small
point.
or the large. That's bad.
Yeah, that is a very point. And I do agree. It's really always small or large in that instance. I guess on the 9-8 deuce, what have you, I do feel like Doug's range is naturally going to be wider, and a board texture like that is going to provide him a lot more of equity to capture. So, yeah, if he's only check ripping or check folding, great, but that's simply not what's happening. He's calling it a pretty high frequency, and what I've seen, at least in previous streams, is that there's a lot of turns that are kind of dirty. Daniel's not going to have a lot of coverage when the turn is a 10 or a jack or even a spade, really, for that matter. He's going to have suited hands, of course, in his 4-bet range, but it's not like it's super wide. So it just ends up resulting in the range that carries the biggest advantage doing a lot of bluff catching on river. I guess, like, theoretically it makes perfect sense to use a small bet. I totally agree. But against a really good player, I feel like we end up with a lot of EV regret, where we're choosing the slightly higher EV decision, but we also complicate our strategy on later streets.
Yeah, that's probably fair. I think the complication of 4-bet pots is pretty evident to pretty much anybody, I guess, just because most of us don't play that many of them to begin with. And then in a heads-up match where you've got 4-bet pots developing, where, yes, on the one hand, ranges are narrow, but also you've got all these dynamics and metagame concerns to kind of try to factor into things. These are really complicated spots, and I would imagine the value of equity denial in those situations is really significant. So certainly something to consider. I notice here that we're actually kind of stacks are getting deeper now. So we've got like 130-ish bigs deep on the right hand side to start the hand, something like that, 52k, something like that. So what over the course of the match so far, what's the deepest that we've seen them playing? Have you noticed? Because I know you're obviously big on the deeper stacks.
Yeah, I think that they were about 200 blinds effective each.
At one point, you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, so they haven't played it. They haven't gone to the point of like being like 400 deep or anything like that.
Okay. I mean, Doug's gotten a stack that big, and Daniel has at times had stacks that were like 300 or 400 blinds, but never both of them at the same time.
Do you think that either of them, I would assume Daniel is really the only one to who this applies. Do you think that either of them would specifically not want to have the stacks get that deep? Or
I think Daniel probably doesn't, but also doesn't really have a say. So
right, yeah. It's funny looking at this from Daniel's perspective, right? Because you have to think he went into this knowing that he's an underdog, and at the same time, it's such an undertaking to play 25,000 hands as an underdog that you would have to think like there's some avenue through which Daniel expects to potentially be able to recapture an edge in a way that Doug can't identify, right? So what do you think here from Daniel's perspective? Like, what is it that's justifying doing this whole thing for Daniel? Like, where is
I just think that he thinks he can hang, which I do believe that he's trained up to a point of being at that level.
Sure.
And I'm not sure what's all going on behind the scenes. I think that he's continually advancing his learning as fast as possible. So I do think that he'll continually add bet sizes. And I think that there was a point in the match where he was doing some things that were causing problems for Doug. He was just like implementing a pretty awkward pre-flop strategy that I think was a little less studied for Doug. But that seems to have gotten ironed out. And that's kind of the issue, is that Doug was able to train into Daniel's strategy pretty easily because he was only utilizing 2 bet sizes. So Doug had perfect parameters whenever he was entering solves. Where Daniel couldn't really do that. He had to do a lot of estimating because Doug will hit you with the 20%. He'll hit you with 33, the half pot here and there, 3/4. He has like low frequency bet sizes, and that makes it very difficult to decide. Speaking of low frequency bet sizes, we see Daniel bet 1/7 pot here on the river. Could be a misclick. Could have been going
the old in position block bet.
That not very incentivized. Might have been an induction type play.
Could have been.
He's just hoping to earn a check raise. Ryan Seago put in the chat, first of all, stop yelling. But he wants to know what other bet size Daniel could have used on that flop. I think that's one of the spots where half pot is pretty well accepted. We landed at 1.5 SPR. If we go half pot, we're gonna put ourselves in a situation where we land on the turn with so half pot, 2 pots. We're gonna have about 0.5 SPR on the turn. I think that's okay, pretty standard for heads-up scenarios for SPR to shrink below 1. Not really something that we commonly see in full ring, just because you're trying to pot construct where the point of leverage you're at about 1 SPR. But in heads-up, we saw it through Doug's small check raise.
Yeah.
He check raised laying a massive price to Daniel, and then Daniel shoved laying a massive price to Doug, and he has folds there.
Right.
So it is a lot more tit for tat. It's a lot more of a chess match than it is just utter direct odds.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just realizing I'm not seeing the chat here, so I got to bring up the stream on my other screen.
Oh yeah, sorry.
I gotta watch us here.
I popped it out myself.
That's good.
Yeah, you can pop it out onto your main screen so that you
pop out chat. Yeah, there we go. All right, that's good.
I do want to give a shout out to everybody. Nice. We appreciate you guys supporting the stream. All of
thank
the
you
regulars
guys
here. Odyssey modding it as usual. Mario Arias begging for a fat head of me. You're gonna have to make your own, man. I'm not contributing to this. Odyssey did mention we are running a merch sale, so today's the last day. If you want to get 25% off, you can utilize the code AlphaRec, or you can just head to the site. Actually, it might already be 25% off, so you may be able to get it on top of that. Because we're generous here. We're giving it away. You know what I'm saying? Gem Breeze, you're new to the chat. We appreciate you showing up. Thank you so much. Worth it. Another regular. Jeremy McPhee, I think somebody else new. Thank you so much. Yeah, we're just we're trying to compete. These guys like Ingram and GG, they got 5,000 concurrent viewers. We're happy with our little slot.
How many we got right now? I don't see how many we got.
We have 301.
301. Wow. If I get that many viewers on my stream regularly, I'd be pretty happy. 301's not too bad.
Yeah, if you guys haven't already, check out Matt on Twitch.
Yes.
I think
there's the plug.
I think it's worth a lot of value to everybody. He's really diving into the mental health world, which is something that I think is very taboo in this society for some god unknown reason. And everybody could use a little bit of just kind of like checking in, I think.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I'm doing a lot of.
Yeah, best I can tell, that's like a lot of what your streams are.
Yeah, I mean it's a mixture of a lot of things. Just today I started doing like a segment where I would pass on mental models and techniques and things that I've learned from poker that would be helpful for people. So we're doing a little bit of like trying to educate people. We do stuff where we will like read a book. Like we've been reading this book that I have right here in front of me, Lost Connections by Johan Hari. We've been reading that on stream. Yeah, really great book so far. We're about 2/3 of the way through it. Really interesting book. Yeah, we do all kinds of stuff. Thank you, Poker Odyssey, for dropping my link in the chat. I appreciate you. But yeah.
Yeah, I've actually read and finished Lost Connections. Everybody said that they loved it. I kind of had mixed feelings on it, to be quite honest.
Okay.
Yeah. A lot of it was just talking about. I'm actually really curious to hear your take on it, because I think that a big crux of the book itself is kind of trying to weed out what's the medication for
antidepressants.
Yeah, antidepressants. Sorry.
Yeah.
And I'm very for that, but a lot of the anecdotes that he was utilizing, I personally just couldn't relate to, so it didn't really hit home for me.
I see. Yeah, I think my take on it really is that I think that the trickiest thing about any kind of book that's written with a perspective of giving advice to people who suffer from depression or who suffer from anxiety, things like that, is that there's sort of two schools of thought where if you've been through it, you come at it from a position of pure just like, I feel you, I know where you're coming from, right? And you don't want the person to think that you're criticizing them when you give them advice. And then if you haven't been through it, there's a lot of this really toxic culture from people who who think like they just say like depression isn't real, like just get over yourself, like all this bullshit that is not helpful to anybody, right? And it's so difficult to straddle that line between those two things, because you don't want somebody to get like to have like a defensive reaction of feeling like they're being criticized when someone tries to help them. But that's kind of how depression makes you feel sometimes. Like when someone says, hey, maybe you should try this and it might make you feel better, sometimes you're like, well, don't you think I already tried that? Like if I could just do stuff to make myself feel better, I would be doing it. Like what the hell, you know?
Sure.
So I think the book does a really good job of talking from a perspective of he's a guy who's gone through this stuff and he knows how it feels. And he's also looking at the science. He's looking to talk to people that have done studies, and he's looking to break down a lot of assumptions that I think have built up culturally. And
I found the science elements of it to be very fascinating because you know, I also have kind of a negative connotation and negative opinion of antidepressants.
Mhm.
Just in a dependency standpoint,
Sure.
and like hearing the science from both sides was really nice.
Mhm.
But again, like I also feel like that's a very privileged position because I haven't had any issues with this.
Sure.
So like the anecdotes didn't really hit home for me.
Mhm.
It's like, I can't really relate. Like I can sympathize, but
Sure.
I can't relate closely enough to really empathize. And
Other way around. You can empathize, but you can't sympathize.
Wait, I thought empathy was whenever you could put yourself in another person's shoes.
Empathy is being able to understand what someone's experiencing. Sympathy is having been through it yourself, and sympathy is when you know what it feels like. Because sympathy means it's like the same root etymology as symbiosis, like living together, working together with something. So it means you feel the same thing together because you've been through it. Empathy is outward extending feeling, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I've always thought of them as the exact opposite. I think of empathy as a much more powerful emotion.
I think it is, because it requires you to even if you haven't been through it, you're still able to understand or like try to imagine what somebody's going through, right?
Right.
So Lily says no, it's the other way around. Which Matt are you talking to, Lily? I hope you're talking to other Matt. Because if you're talking to me and I'm wrong, then I'll be
there's a slight delay, so she's probably just correcting me the way you did.
So I see some questions. I see a couple questions for me. What part of England are you from? I'm originally from the southwest in a tiny town in the middle of nowhere called Sherborne. But I lived in Southampton for about 10 years before I came to the US. I've been living in the US and in Vegas for about 3.5 years. My background is in online tournaments. So I was an online tournament player for a long time. And then I moved to Vegas when I married, well, not long after I married my American wife. And I've been playing a mixture of live and online since. It's basically my background. So Lily says Berkey is right, I'm pretty sure. Okay, now I want to look this up.
Yeah, I'm currently looking it up too.
Okay. Empathy versus sympathy.
In the meantime, we have a pot brewing here while Hunt gets to the root of this. I trust the linguist over myself.
That's the thing. I trust myself naturally too on this. So if I'm wrong, I'll be annoyed.
The thing is though, like you very likely could be wrong just through evolution, just like the way literally no longer means literally.
That's just an American thing though. Like in other countries, words mean what they mean. In America,
Sure.
You just say what the fuck you want.
Well, we're here, man. You know, we are here.
All right. We have a pot developing somewhere, did you say?
It ended up just being bet fold on turn.
Oh, okay. So Liz says, sympathy is feeling compassion, sorrow, or pity for the hardships that another person encounters. Empathy is putting yourself in the shoes of another, which is why actors often talk about it.
Yeah, I'm reading the exact same definition. We're probably on dictionary.com together.
Yes, I think we probably are. This is the dictionary.com live stream.
A real symbiotic relationship here between me and Lily. We found the same link.
Yeah. I'm confused now because I don't know which part, like both one of those, like those, that feels like it applies to what I said. So maybe this is just a cultural misunderstanding here. Because if I read that,
generally when we feel sorrow or pity, we can't put ourselves in their shoes. So like I would feel sympathy for a homeless person. I have no idea what it's like to be homeless. I pity him.
See that? Yeah, maybe I am just wrong. Because I would never say I feel sympathy because I've never been homeless. I would say I feel empathy for that person.
Right.
If I had been homeless, I would say I feel sympathy because I know what it's.
Yeah, I would say I feel empathy for somebody who grew up poor because I've experienced it.
Okay, that's interesting.
But yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. This is not the dictionary.com live stream, like I said. I'm probably just wrong. It's fine. You can be wrong sometimes.
I certainly could be wrong here too.
Doesn't really matter.
I only have an ounce of confidence because I got into a fight about it like 4 or 5 years ago where Jess Wellman was trying to tell me that they meant the exact same thing. And I'm like,
definitely don't mean the exact same thing.
I definitely know is not correct.
That's definitely not true. We can agree on that, yeah. Am I playing on my Twitch channel too, or just focusing on mental health? I've done one poker stream so far. I'm not going to be playing a lot of poker on stream. My goal really isn't to make it a poker thing. I think that, there's something to be said for like being able to leverage my existing network of people. And I want people who are poker players to feel like they can come there and, they can connect with me in some way, of course. But there's so much beyond the world of poker that I think people can benefit from perspectives that poker players have. So part of what I've been doing is trying to bring perspectives from poker to people outside of it, and to connect with people through things like games and other streaming outlets, just to try to hopefully increase awareness about mental health and things like that.
Yeah, and I do really think that it is a service. I'm very interested to see that the path that you take moving forward, like how this thing grows.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just confident that like stuff like this gets legs. Like you're going to start a podcast at some point that's going to be very helpful. It's very weird because it's like I recognize two things.
Mm-hmm.
Twitch is a huge market.
Yes.
Podcasting is a huge market, and the overlap is next to zero.
Well, you'd be surprised. Surprised.
I was going to say, but the actual functionality of each is almost identical.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's true. In that, I think you're right to a good degree. Although I'm pretty much already doing a podcast. I've had people on for interviews and stuff that we do on stream, and it's like I'm working on turning that into just an audio only sort of thing that can be done at this point. My wife and I are also thinking about doing a mental health podcast together because she has a lot of perspectives to add there, but she doesn't love being on camera. So we'll probably do that. But yeah, at the moment the biggest obstacle is like finding time to do more stuff in that arena. Because I still have to make a living somehow, and Twitch doesn't pay the bills just yet. So we'll have to figure that out somewhere down the line. But we'll be able to talk more about this, I'm sure, when there's not as much poker going on. I feel like we're missing hands. I feel like we're talking about me all the time.
We see a 3-bet pot here on the right, and Daniel actually chose the 40% size here, which is something that I haven't seen too much out of him thus far. I imagine this is a new tool he's added to the tool belt, and this texture makes sense to me for that. You want to choose the larger size on these rainbow boards, in my opinion. At least like from the bit of studies that I've done. Your opponent, who's going to have the wider range than you as the 3-better, he's going to have a lot of suited hands. So he's going to have a lot of peels, a lot of backdoors in this particular spot. Daniel goes then 3/4 on the turn. Makes a lot of sense. I do think he still carries forward a lot of advantage on this turn queen.
Mm-hmm.
Here on the river, I would expect to see... I'm not sure, man. I think we're going to be pretty mixed here between blocking, shoving, and checking. But I think checking may be a little imbalanced to folding.
It seems hard to block here though, because you're blocking into an uncapped range where Doug has a lot of 9x of hearts, Jack X of hearts, and anytime you can block and just get jammed on and be in the same spot, a lot of the time checking is going to work out better. So.
But Doug doesn't have a lot of ace of hearts.
He doesn't have a lot of ace of hearts, but he has enough. Like he certainly has some ace X of hearts that can peel, flop, and turn.
Sure.
Some like
I just think
ace 8.
Yeah, I guess like I think we carry the vast majority of the highest flushes, the king high, ace high flushes. I would imagine, or
yeah, I think that's true. But I also feel like any flush that Doug has, if we block, he's still jamming. Like I don't think the fact that we can have
that's true. That's
some
true.
ace high flushes is going to stop him from jamming. So I feel like it's the same equation, really.
Sure.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah, I guess it just feels bad. Like it feels bad to do much else.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to think because we have so many strong hands there that aren't nutted. We have so many straights. We have so many 2 pairs.
Mm-hmm.
I guess they just check call, but like you're still facing a rip.
Yeah, but I also think it's very possible that's just a spot where like if Daniel has a straight and 2 pair or something, he's just supposed to rip, and if he runs into a flush, he runs into a flush. Like, I don't know how much getting away from 2 pair versus flush is going to happen in a 1-to-1 SPR or a 0.9 SPR on the river there.
Yeah.
I see Caleb in the chat saying, I've got to see these hands Daniel keeps folding to river jams. Yeah, I'm in the same boat. Like, I want to know what Daniel's folding in these spots.
Well, more importantly, I want to know what he's 3/4 pot betting turn with that leads to a check fold on a pretty non-board TNU card. Like, the 7's a brick, with the exception of it bringing backdoor hearts, but a lot of Daniel's like double barrels there should possess hearts.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe some 10x and stuff as well. Maybe some like ace 10 type stuff. But I agree with what you said about the flop on those rainbow boards where you want to size up because denying the backdoors counts for a lot. You know, that the ability to deny the backdoors plus also deny some of the gut shots and stuff that exist in that spot, that's really relevant. I think those Jack 9-5 rainbow, it's a classic example of a board where almost everything that's in each player's range is going to have some degree of connectivity with that kind of board, because even the stuff that doesn't have a backdoor is likely to have some kind of gut shot or pair or something, right? So those are the boards where the large sizings tend to be favored a bit more because they just have so much more denial power on those boards.
Right.
I'm going to bump my lighting up here just a second.
Worth It asks, do you know David Benefield? He's really into stoicism. Have you looked into it at all? I do know Dave very well. And I wouldn't say I've studied stoicism, but I am extremely familiar with it. Let's put it that way. Studied is in my opinion the wrong word because I haven't like actively dove down the rabbit hole. But yes, I'm very familiar with stoicism. I think that it has a lot of value, but I'm not really sold on any one specific philosophy, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's hard to the more you sort of commit to one specific philosophy and say like this is the way to go, you know, stoicism is the answer or whatever other philosophy is the answer, like the more you just leave yourself into a open to being in a situation where, you know, years down the line you're like, oh shit, I shouldn't have gone so far to one extreme with my whole outlook on life, you know.
Right. So this is kind of interesting here on the left. We saw Daniel 3-bet, get the Jack 4 deuce 2 heart board, and then begin checking. I've seen him do a fair amount of this as well. It seems very difficult to juggle. If we're betting the Jack 9, what was it, Jack 9-5, I believe, Jack 9-6, Jack 9-6 rainbow. So we're c-betting that spot in a 3-bet pot. This board is a lot more advantageous to him as the 3-better.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of surprised to not see bets coming through here. I suppose. I mean, what are we looking at here? Check calling twice, right? Like perhaps hearts, nutted hearts.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's possible that Daniel's. Okay, yeah,
that's shocking to me.
Okay, so I was going to say from the perspective of like it's possible we're seeing a dynamic now where Daniel is becoming conscious that he has started like folding rivers a lot, and he's starting to think in terms of protecting his turn ranges now by adding in more hands that are willing to check call turn, check call river in spots like that. That might be why we're seeing the 10s pop up there.
But 10s would have done that had he c-bet flop.
Oh, he didn't. Sorry, I got turned around. He didn't c-bet. I thought the idea was he c-bet flop. Oh, okay.
No, that would have made perfect sense. That line would have made absolute perfect sense had he bet, checked.
For some reason, I spaced out and thought he bet the flop.
Doug went quarter, Doug went 3/4, and then Doug shut down.
Interesting. What did Doug have? Did we show?
No,
he
didn't.
Oh.
He didn't show.
Interesting.
I'm really. I mean, I guess I'm not that surprised that Doug shut down that river. He does not have a 10, obviously.
Yeah.
Most of the time, given Daniel does.
One thing I'm curious about is how are they, without the ability to track hand histories, how are they tracking the number of hands played?
You can go back in the replayer and see pretty much everything.
Oh, right. Okay, so they're just, at the end of every session, they just look at the replayer and see how many hands they played?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're doing like their own analysis of that too. Like they have no way of exporting the hand histories, but they can just rewatch the entire match or the entire session.
Yeah, I think I tweeted something about this a while ago. Like I heard that they paused the match because Daniel was mad that Doug was having people translate the hand histories and put them through Poker Tracker for analysis.
That was just misreported.
Oh, really? Okay. So that makes much more sense then, because I was thinking at the time that was like, it's like a sports team telling the opposition that they can't watch game film, or something like that. It's like, right. You can't, if the information is available to both players, you can't really control what's done with it at that point. Right. But yeah, by the way, I never even figured out where did they eventually land on charts, because I was aware of the whole debate, but I wasn't aware of any kind of resolution to it.
The resolution was just that they didn't police it, I guess.
Okay.
Or they can't
police. Right. So Daniel kind of recognized that it was kind of ridiculous to say that Doug shouldn't be able to use charts, and Doug also hopefully recognized that it was ridiculous for him to be super concerned about whether or not he was quote unquote allowed to use charts, and they just decided to shut the hell up. That sounds good.
Yeah. Sorry,
It's all right. It's all good. I can keep it rolling for a minute. Poker Odyssey says, I'm sure they'd have hired someone to watch and annotate all the hands. Yeah, I mean, you'd think that with this much money on the line, you just have to, right?
Yeah, and regarding the charts, I know that they have a full setup where they have like 360 vision at all times, but I don't know who's watching those feeds, right? It's not like Doug and Daniel just have a feed up of one another. So I guess like some third party they trusted, police, is making sure nothing unscrupulous is happening. But yeah, I'm pretty sure that they just said whatever. The charts are fine. It really is. It's so funny because this kind of brings me back to a tweet that you put up the other day where you just said, like, okay, simple poker advice, stop scrutinizing pre-flop play so much. It doesn't matter nearly as much as like river play, which is true.
Yeah.
And a lot of the pushback was, well, if you don't get pre-flop right, then you can never get river right. But that's kind of fundamentally false. You don't actually have to have pre-flop right. You just need to be intimate with what your pre-flop ranges are.
It's literally completely false. Like if you arrive at the river with a range that is bluff catching and your opponent arrives with a polarized range, it doesn't matter what your bluff catches are. And if you're calling with the right frequency to keep them indifferent, then they're indifferent regardless of whether your bluff catchers are all bottom pair or all top pair or whatever else. So literally, if you play the river perfectly, and if you could find some hypothetical mystery way to arrive at the river perfectly, despite making a bunch of pre-flop mistakes, then nothing would matter. But the only reason pre-flop matters is because bad pre-flop play makes it much harder to play well post-flop.
Yeah.
But if you play well post-flop, you can start doing things pre-flop that other people can't do. And in the vast majority of cases, the reason I made this tweet is like, in 95% of cases or more, the reason people lose is because they're not playing well post-flop, and they're spending so many hours, like, what's the phrase? The phrase is like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, I think is the phrase. Like, they're trying to fix their pre-flop strategy to make it absolutely perfect, and yet they're just like folding every river 80% of the time, and it's like, that's why you're losing, because you're just folding every river every time you face a bet. Doesn't matter what you do pre-flop, just stop folding rivers. And there's so many cases like that I work with, and so I just put that tweet out there, and it got a relative amount of attention, but seemingly some people are convinced that pre-flop is like the most important thing,
Yeah. Well, that was what I was circling back to, is that the irony is when this debate about charts came up, every single high stakes player was just kind of like, it doesn't matter. We'll spot you the charts.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just like, how can it be both things at the same time? The entire community is jumping down your throat saying like, all that matters is pre-flop. You have to get it right. And then the high stakes community is just like, bro, like, it's whatever. Like, you can have the charts. I could write it on a napkin in 3 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Right. Like I think the way that I phrased it when someone asked me about it was like, you could spend the whole afternoon building a pre-flop strategy and then never change that pre-flop strategy for like a year, and you would be better at the end of that year if you just spent all your study time on post-flop,
Right.
It's
so today we're watching a replay while Daniel sits out. Was a 3-bet pot by Doug. Yeah, I mean, this is pretty standard. So Doug c-bet for quarter on flop, I believe. Daniel peels. He's going to be peeling most of his backdoor equity. Turn 5 of spades is 100% a brick. Doug's just always going to win this pot, and I imagine he begins checking the 5 in order to try to get a second street of value on the river at a pretty high frequency. I imagine he would be kind of prone to overbluff the turn, maybe
Probably.
to a certain degree.
Yeah. It's easy to
get away
overbluff.
with it for that
It's
match.
easy to overbluff turns on boards like that where there's no obvious turn bluffs, and so you can just like interpret it and say, well, like, oh, I can just bluff with Jack 10 here because it doesn't really matter what I bluff with, and then all of a sudden you're bluffing like all your broadways and you're not value betting your second pairs, and now you're just way bluff heavy.
Yeah, but that's difficult to catch in game too, because Daniel's gonna have a bunch of middling hands.
Mm-hmm.
He's just gonna have like 8-9 suited that he peeled, and Jack 10 suited, and all these other hands that like can never call two.
Yeah, definitely. So Joe says the hashtag CPV came out in force on that tweet. What's CPV? I don't know what CPV is.
We got a lot of inside jokes here at the stream.
Okay.
It's the chat pro voice. Chin originated it when he was streaming. He goes into this nice little high pitch. Well, you see, what happens if you get pre-flop wrong is that you can never get the flop, turn, and river correct.
Yeah.
But I mean, the irony of we're poking fun at it, but there is no quote unquote right for pre-flop.
Mm-hmm.
The way we're solving it now is very like blunt force, hammer to nail approach, and we're gonna see. I mean, charts change. Pre-flop charts change all the time. There's a reason why Doug has his charts and Daniel has his. It's because they're different. Yeah. We do see a 4-bet pot here on the right. Daniel does choose again the standard small size, which I believe he's just going to choose pretty much always at this SPR. On this texture, it makes a lot more sense to me, I think. Doug is forced to give up.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of give-ups from Doug there in that 4-bet pot scenario. 8 deuce 5 is not a board that interacts substantially with really anything that's going to be in Doug's 3-bet call range with any high frequency.
Yeah, we did see a very interesting hand take place last match that got a lot of hype on Twitter. Our boy Landon was in the streets solving a little bit, and he kind of got flamed for it.
Who's out there flaming Landon? Landon wins all the money. Who's flaming
but he just
Landon?
like very confidently said something that we'll get into it, I guess, real quick.
Okay.
So it was a 4-bet pot. Doug was out of position with Queen 10 suited, and I believe the board texture was like Queen 7-6.
Yeah.
Doug actually led quarter pot after Daniel had 4-bet. Daniel calls turn jack. Doug rips for pot-ish, maybe slightly less. And Daniel calls with ace jack suited. Maybe actually it was ace jack off. Doug has Queen 10 for top pair.
Wow.
And there's a lot of debate of since when did we start leading on Queen 7-6 and 4-bet pots? But it does make a lot of sense because particularly on Queen high boards, the out of position player is going to make that pair at a greater frequency. And it's more of a protection type play because the in position player is going to have so much ace king and so much like ace jack type of hands that he's just checking back at high frequency. So if he just has ace jack and ace king in full, that's 32 combos. Well, there isn't a whole, when you block a queen, he's only going to have 12 combos of aces and kings. One combo of queens, a handful of king queen, ace queen, which you're stacking off against anyway, and then jacks, which is going to start checking back to pot control, and you want to get value from those types of hands. So it does intuitively make a lot of sense to me that lead is just making money with a certain subset of hands, largely like Queen X, and then potentially, I guess, hands that may have the ability to bet small then go off.
It's an unusual. Oh yeah, speaking of going off, what the hell?
Yeah, I think the type of hand that could potentially bet and then go off would be like a King 10 suited.
Yeah.
So he blocks enough Queen X there where he can lead, and then on like the turn jack just be all in.
Yeah, the stuff that blocks and has backdoors, like wrapping around the top pair with the backdoor on those boards is always really powerful.
Yeah, can we replay that, Andre? I just want to see how they got to the river in that spot because I'm not so sure Daniel's hand is a great candidate. Okay, we missed the replay. Sorry, guys.
No worries.
Yeah, no big deal. That was kind of an interesting one to show up with. The jack of clubs is a blocker, but it's not overly relevant on a one-liner.
Right.
Where the 10 also didn't really come into play. I think 9-8 was the nut straight. If I'm not mistaken.
I tell you what, I got the stream up here. I can like rewind on my other screen. We don't get the replay, but I can at least walk you through what the action was. It was it's the 6-8-4, wasn't it? That low board.
Yep.
Yeah. So 6-8-4. Let me try to find the actual spot. Okay, so it looks like it was just a single raise pot. There's 3,600 in the pot on the flop. Daniel's on the button. It goes check check. Doug checks the turn and deuce of clubs, so it's 6-8 4 deuce with the 4 and deuce of clubs. Daniel is going to check back again, so it goes check to the river, and the river's the 7 of clubs, so it's now three clubs and 4 to a straight out there. Doug bets and Doug bets and Daniel raises, I think. Yeah, Doug bets 2,900 into 3,600, and then Daniel raises to about 12K, I think. Yeah. So check to the river and then bet raise. Interesting.
Yeah, it feels kind of not great.
Yeah, I mean, it's a line where Daniel's obviously like he's repping a 5 when he raises that river or clubs, and he doesn't have a ton of 5x in his range. He doesn't have a ton of clubs. I think that really the question there, I suppose, it all depends on to what extent does Doug potentially perceive Daniel to be raising 2 pairs on that river? Because if Daniel can raise some 2 pairs on that river, which is not out of the question in a heads-up match, then
as played, I think it's pretty tough.
It's tough, but like Doug has got to lead the turn with a lot of his 5x though, right? Like on 8-6-4 deuce, 5x that has an open ender has to lead the turn quite a bit.
I mean, not leading 6-5 kind of indicates to me that may not be true.
Oh, did he have 6-5 in the end?
Yeah.
Well, 6-5 has a pair though, so like a lot of his unpaired 5x though surely
I see. Okay.
is going to be a lot of his turn bluffing range. And then when he doesn't bet the turn, you'd have to think that he has a little bit less 5x, and it's maybe just going to be like some of his paired 5x, like 6-5, 4-5, maybe deuce 5 suited if he has it.
Right.
So like, I don't think it's out of the question for Daniel to raise 2 pair on that river, but it's unlikely.
It was a big raise too. He went
exactly. That's the thing. That was the next point I was going to make. Like, it was a big raise, so like, it's a very polarizing spot. And I mean, theoretically, Daniel should have some clubs there that check back twice, right? But like, how many clubs does he actually have? This is a spot where understanding how your actual range is perceived is probably more valuable than the theory, because the theory is you're supposed to have clubs there, but like, if you recognize that Doug doesn't really believe you have that many clubs here, you shouldn't make that raise as a bluff very often.
Yeah. Worth It says Doug had a club in his hand, maybe he folds without the club. He's not folding any 5. And Brian Bernalis says Landon included 6-3 suited in the 4-bet calling range, which was weird to some heads-up regs. He didn't include it. It was included like 0.01%. And when he showed the output, it was not squared proportionally because Doug's line was like never chosen. So he just wanted to demonstrate like what the turn looked like if that line was ever taken. And like some hands showed up like 6-3 suited, which is literally almost a 0% hand. But people just like look at the output non-squared, and kind of like jump down the throat for it.
For those of you who might not know what we mean by squared or unsquared, it just refers to the actual graphical readout on PO, where if you are looking at a line that doesn't occur a high frequency, what you'll see is that if you have the squares checked to be proportional, it'll only fill up such a tiny portion of the square that you can't even see what's going on, right? So you have to untick that option in order to see what's actually happening as a whole, because the frequency of it happening is so low. And so Landon unticked that particular setting, and it confused people and made everybody think that 6-3 suited was in the range, apparently.
Yeah. But he also did get different results than like DTO and Doug and a handful of other well-known names.
Interesting.
So they were basically saying that it is a lead at some frequency. He got a 0%. It all comes down to the inputs. I do see conceptually where it could be a lead.
Yeah, I can see some value there. And ultimately, it's funny because it might have been, we can't rule out the possibility that it might have been something like where Doug is like, let's throw in a lead here and there, like let's just like throw out something that's a bit outside the box and see how Daniel responds. We can't rule out the idea that Doug thought he had some kind of exploit that made it better in that circumstance to lead, even despite the fact that PO doesn't necessarily like it that much.
Yeah, so, that's the thing. It's like he's just not going to publicly say that.
Of course, yeah. Like if that was the case, we would never know. So like. Right. The debate is kind of moot eventually.
If he just knows that Doug or that Daniel just checks back in 4-bet pots on that texture too often, then of course he just leads.
Right, exactly.
So where it says he's not folding any 5 to a huge raise there. DNegs should not raise that big, LOL. DNegs need him to fold a 5 for such a large raise size. That's not true.
Yeah, I don't think so.
He's laying 2 to 1. All straights are calling, and all flushes are continuing in some capacity. Doug still needs to be continuing with about a third of his range there.
Right, and remember that Doug's range for betting that river includes a lot more than just a 5. Doug's range for betting that river probably includes some 1 pair for value and a whole bunch of bluffs and things like that. So Daniel can raise there as a bluff very comfortably, even if he knows that Doug is never ever going to even think about folding a 5, which is very much true in that spot. He just has to be sure that.
Doug has to call half the time, and he needs about 33% equity to call. And a 5, like all straights, are obviously going to be at least winning the pot a third of the time.
Right, and so it's mostly a question of what's that marginal point where Doug is right on the borderline. And I think like his 2 pair and his like 1 pair that has a blocker, like 1 pair with a club, is he bluff catching those hands? That's what's going to make the difference there.
Right. Totally agree.
Spades out here on the board right now.
On a side note, which we haven't really paid too close attention to, Daniel is up pretty substantially so far in this match. He's ran up quite the stack on the left. He has about three starting stacks, a little bit more. Down about a half a starting stack on the right. Getting a little bit closer to a full one. But it's nice, I'm sure, for him at least, to be rounding and chipping away at this as best he can. I haven't really played too much heads up outside. I mean, this pandemic I played a lot. And though I don't think I have a very sound heads up strategy, I do recognize like how much of the meta comes into play with people who are susceptible to it. So the vast majority of the people that I played heads up, I feel like were super susceptible to meta. And I have a lot of hands to prove it. You know, I think I played like I'm trying to think. So it was a $74,000 pot at 25.50. Which is what, the equivalent of 1,200 big blinds?
It's a lot. I can't count that many big blinds.
Yeah, so we played about a 1,200.
I can't count that many big blinds.
We played roughly a 1,200 big blind pot in a situation where, my opponent had just lost his mind. And that's certainly a big part of the meta. Like, I just flopped the nuts in a 3-bet pot, and we played a 1,200 big blind pot. That just can't happen. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't happen in GTO land. Yeah. It just doesn't. The minimum threshold necessary to play a 1,200 big blind pot is like nuts versus nuts, where one of the persons is free rolling the other one.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like the solver doesn't want to be all in ever at that point. Like it just doesn't want to get that many big blinds in.
Yeah, and I mean, like we're not talking about like a Jack 4 deuce board. We're talking about like a 5 6 7 board where I just had 8 9. And it's already a situation where like in a 3-bet pot where I have 8 9 in position, I just don't stand to win very many chips. Because the 3-better is just checking at a high frequency. But the second that like, the metagame comes into play and he just starts off with a small bet size that he shouldn't start off with, and he recognizes I've been attacking his small C bet sizes on textures where he's not incentivized to bet them, now all of a sudden it's just like he has a 9 in his hand, so the go-off begins.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question from Flop... that was the... let's take both of those. Flop Set says, I think the 5-6 combined with Queen is a relevant factor. Hits Doug's range harder. To a degree, I definitely agree that he probably wouldn't lead Queen Deuce Deuce because it's much more of a static texture. So to a degree, that's true. Yeah. Worth It's question says, so he makes it 20.
Well, his equity is also lower.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Like when Daniel continues, his equity is just lower because now he's dead versus King's races where he's at least alive with Queen 10.
Yeah. Let's say he makes it 20 to 25K, then the 5 needs to consider folding. Actually, not really. Kind of what Poker Odyssey is alluding to here is that there's a threshold where a 5 is a bluff catcher, right? So like if once we reach the point where the raise sizing is such that a worse hand than a 5 is never raising for value. So let's say if we thought that arbitrarily, let's say Daniel's never raising 2 pair or a set or anything like that. As soon as that's the case, a 5 is now a bluff catcher because it loses to a flush, it chops with another 5, or it loses to a higher straight as well, which there was out there. There was 10-9 was out there. And then it beats everything else. So once it's a bluff catcher, there is no particular threshold at which a 5 is going to start considering folding versus never folding. What matters is the frequency that Daniel's bluffing in that spot. And what happens is as his raise sizing gets bigger, you're getting a worse price, so you need to be able to find more bluffs in order to justify the call. Now, that might mean in practicality that it ends up being a spot where against the large raise, Doug might have decided that Daniel wasn't bluffing enough, and therefore he might have ended up folding a 5. But it's not a question of a correlation between how big the raise size is and how much a 5 is thinking about folding. Because once the raise comes in, if it's never a 2 pair or it's never a set or anything like that, a 5 is now a bluff catcher no matter how big the raise is. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, essentially, no matter how much is being bet, we still only will need 50% equity. Like, so if there's $1 in the pot and Daniel bets 100 million,
yeah,
we still only need 50% equity, or slightly slightly less.
Because
like
you're never getting worse than 1-to-1. You're never getting like 0.9 to 1. You're always getting better than 1-to-1. In fact, you're never even getting 1-to-1. You can get close, but never 1-to-1.
And for Daniel to make a risk that large, he's incentivized to have equal parts bluff as he is value. So if he's balanced, he will have one bluff for every value candidate. And in that particular instance, now our bluff catchers are indifferent.
Yeah. Although they wouldn't, let's say he was to actually literally have 1-to-1, exactly 1-to-1, because we'd technically be getting slightly better than 1-to-1. We would actually be in a situation where if he bets $1 million into a pot of $1 and we think he exactly is 50-50 between bluffs and value, theoretically we make a tiny bit of money by calling. Right. But it's close enough to break even that of course we would not call $1 million into a $1 pot.
Right.
I mean, maybe you care about like a cent in EV compared to $1 million swing. Maybe you care that much, but most people don't. What are we at with Daniel's profit now? 75K for the session.
Yep.
He could be clawing his way to a comeback here.
It's very strange because I've been relatively critical of Daniel, even though like if I had to choose a side, I'm rooting very, very, very hard for Daniel, and I know him personally significantly better than Doug, and like we have a much better, closer relationship. And maybe like it's kind of out of love. I've been scrutinizing him a little bit more, but he's just quietly winning. He's quietly doing what needs to be done. I just can't help but like nitpick at things that I feel like can improve, and it pains me that I'm not seeing the same mistakes out of Doug. Maybe I'm just giving Doug too much benefit of the doubt, but like I just don't see the lack of precision there, and I worry that it's going to come down to a battle of having more coolers than the other guy for Daniel, which is going to be tough for him to win after last session.
Yeah, sure, yeah. So at this point, this might be too difficult of a question, I don't know, but at this point with Doug, let's say $500,000 ahead, give or take, after 13 sessions. So after, it's going to probably be about, what do you think, maybe about 6,500, 7,000 hands by the end of today. So we're going to be somewhere in the region of a quarter of the way through.
Oh no, way fewer. They've been playing like between 300 and 500 hands a night.
Oh, okay. So we're going to be just under a quarter of the way through, pretty much, right? Let's say we go in to the 25% mark, a quarter mark, and Doug is up $500,000 here. What do you think is the spectrum of most plausible outcome from that point? Would you expect that if Doug has been running a bit over EV here, do you think that $500,000 win would be like a really good result for Doug, or do you think that maybe we could see Doug up $1 million plus by the end of this thing based on what you've seen so far?
Oh, I think Doug certainly has the capability of getting over 7 figures, even at the halfway point where Daniel has the option to quit. It's not that much, to be quite honest. $1 million swing is, maybe him. It's roughly Doug winning, I think, 10 big blinds per 100.
Yeah, it's 25 buy-ins, right? Because they're buying in for 40K. So yeah. Yeah,
and right now Doug is well over that. He's somewhere in the neighborhood. I think he just posted that he's winning like 37 big blinds per 100. And he acknowledged that he's running well over EV, and that's not sustainable. But with that much of a head start, even a correction is very likely to put him to a point where it's possible to get up over $1 million. If Daniel doesn't have like some good fortune go his way in the next handful of matches. Whether or not he quits at 12.5K hands, I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, here's the thing. Like, is 25 buy-ins insurmountable over 12 and a half like 12.5k hands?
Mm-hmm.
Probably not. But can Daniel win at,
can he make up the ground?
Yeah, can, he's already a dog, right? Like, we already think he has a negative win rate, or it's likely that he has a negative win rate. Now he has to, like, not just exemplify a positive win rate, but like a really high one higher than what is available to like elite players, and he has to do it over a pretty large sample. So I think, like, if he takes all of the ego out of it, I think he quits at the halfway point if he's down 7 figures. But I'm not so sure that he's planning on taking the ego out of it.
Yeah. This was going to be my next question. Like, what do you think is the line where Daniel should quit? So, like, how much, if he's down X amount, where should he quit at 12.5k hands? Like, if he's down 700k, should he quit?
I think pretty close to where he's at. I think anything over 10 buy-ins is going to be very difficult to neutralize.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably fair. So Neo says Daniel quits at 12.5k hands 100% of the time. Nah, I don't think you're getting how 100% of the time works. 100% of the time literally means there's no possibility of anything else happening. And just because you're really confident it's going to happen doesn't mean that there's no possibility of anything else happening.
This is a fascinating spot here on the right.
Wow. Holy crap.
So Daniel bets 3/4 pot on the end. Doug makes a massive raise with money behind, which is pretty fascinating to me in that regard, because I think you could only be constructed with hands that have exactly the ace of hearts in it whenever you actually have money behind.
Mm-hmm.
Gets really awkward there if you choose that size and you have the queen high flush.
Yeah.
And then gets jumped on. I mean, I guess, like, you just have to call, and that's the nature of heads up poker.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you know what? I've seen so many fucking wild hands this year out of, like, Linus and that whole crew that's battling over in Europe, where, like, they just have the 5-4 suited and it comes 4 flush, and they've check raised all 3 streets and get it in with no pair, no blocker, whatever. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I guess the things that are intuitively awkward to me as a ring game player probably become a lot less awkward in a heads up situation.
Yeah, maybe. I think it's one of those things where there's probably a lot of iterations that have that these players might have gone through, particularly the guys who just play heads up all the time, where they've seen, like, a lot of unusual scenarios. They've seen, like, these spots play out where it goes bet 3-bet, 4-bet all in for, like, some tiny click back amount, and they've run the solve. Like, they've tried to figure out a way of, like, how they're actually supposed to navigate that spot, and I don't know if Doug has been in the lab to that degree lately, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's some spots out there that Doug has put in reps of in heads up games where Daniel has just never played that spot before at all.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify a few things in the chat to Neo, who said 100% of the time he quits. I think Matt's only point was there will be sometimes, even after being down 600,000, that Daniel gets to 12.5 hands and isn't down. And if he's not down, he can't quit.
Yeah. Right.
Period. So
exactly.
Just, not to point out the obvious, but, like, your statement's just very fundamentally flawed.
Right. He can
also,
just run good. Like, Daniel can just go on a huge heater for, like, the next 5,000 hands, and at the 10k hand mark, they could be basically even, Yeah. And at that point, like, Daniel's not quitting no matter how much he loses between 10k and 12.5k.
Right. And also just I think it's worth noting that, like, this whole thing spurned out of a blatant disregard for money.
Yeah.
So I don't think he cares that much that he's not winning.
Yeah.
And then to Caleb's point, I actually don't think he can quit anytime after 12.5k hands. I think it's exactly 12.5k hands. He can choose to throw in the towel, but once he says no, he has to continue for the next 12.5k.
That's what I thought too. And Flop Set's point is really interesting. Like, he says if Doug was up 800k after 10.5k hands, would he maybe ease up a bit? It's really worth discussing if you're Doug. Like, do you want to give Daniel another 200k to, like, incentivize him to potentially lose $1 million in the last 12.5k hands if you think you're on that good of a, like, if you think you have the exploits down. So it's an interesting dynamic as we get to that.
I'll tell you what, I would wager this much. I would be willing to bet a small amount that no matter what the scoreboard is going into the match prior to 12.5k hands, so let's say that they're at 12k hands and they plan on playing 500. No matter what the scoreboard is, I would happily bet at probably pretty close to even money that Doug loses that match.
Yeah, that's fair.
Just like almost always.
Yeah,
I think like even money is probably getting a good price that he's just going to lose that match.
I think
even if it's for a small amount, even if it's just for like 80k or whatever the case may be, it's just like, the overbets may stop coming in that particular session, and we might just see a lot of like half pot type line work.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's so difficult to construct the structure for a matchup like this without leaving it open to something like that, where one player has an incentive to lose one session so that they can continue the match, because the higher EV play is to make sure that the full match happens and stuff like that. And in terms of like let's be honest, a lot of these guys' concern here is they want this to be publicized. They want like attention on it. They want eyes on it. They want eyes on them. And maybe they don't really want the contest to end at the halfway point anyway, because it gets them another 3 months or whatever in the limelight to continue being the center of attention in the poker world. And both these guys are guys who are not averse to being the center of attention.
Yeah, I also think that to a certain degree, Daniel appreciates what this challenge is doing for his career, not in a publicity sense, but in a forced way to just make him care about and get better at poker again.
Yeah.
Which I think is awesome for everybody who gets to watch. I do think that you're right. It's a community building thing. I mean, we are one of maybe 6 streams that's taking place right now. There's between Twitch, YouTube, and all the streams that are going on, I would wager there's somewhere around 20,000 people watching at the moment, which is pretty fascinating. And I'm not even certain how I feel about coordinating versus like everybody being independent and you having like a bunch of options as a viewer. I'm kind of like I think it would be cool community wide for there to be coordination, but I also think it's pretty cool that we're able to offer so many different perspectives without just like saying like, okay, this is it, Poker Go has to do it, Nick Schulman has to commentate it, and you all have to be funneled to this paywall in order to watch it. So
I mean, I completely agree. I think like one of the things that I've started to appreciate a lot, having gotten into streaming, is the extent to which streaming is a way for people to just kind of be like, it's like hanging out with people, except they're not actually physically there with you, right? And so the ability for us to kind of choose who we hang out with to watch this match together, I think is like a kind of a nice thing that the community has, where in a lot of other domains you don't get that. Like when you want to watch some kind of big sporting event, right, you don't get to choose one of 5 different TV networks on which to watch it, because it's just the rights have been bought up by whatever company that owns the network. But here we get to provide a different kinds of options for people, and we have different groups around the community depending on what type of entertainment people are looking for. If people are looking for just like the hardcore strategy, if people are looking for the pure entertainment, that option is out there for people. So I think I like it. I'm a fan of it.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Just a quick note, people were talking about the side bets that are out there. I'm sure Doug has a lot of money down. Daniel hasn't been very public about having any side bets whatsoever. I know Perkins laid him 10-1, but I'm sure that that's on a small number since Perkins bet heavily on Daniel anyway. I'm not really certain that they stand to me. I know that at least publicly, Doug and Daniel have not cross-booked at all or made any sort of side wager the way that Galfond did with like Chance.
Crossbook on this would be pretty nuts. Like,
so some people were betting in a crossbook format, which I actually wish I had done instead of just getting late odds, because I think it's just like a much more interesting and fair bet, because Daniel probably just doesn't win this match very often.
Right.
And it's difficult to pin down like what not very often is. So if you're getting 4-1, 5-1, 6-1 even, you still might not be getting justifiably the right price.
Yeah.
But I know like Rob Young got spotted 7 big blinds per 100 with Daniel, or maybe 8. Actually, I honestly can't recall. But that's a pretty big spot. And technically, like, he's still probably taking the slight worst of it. But this also happened when Daniel was up $250,000.
Mm-hmm.
So it's probably a fairly reasonable at that point. And I know of all the people betting, he probably is rooting for Daniel to continue the most.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do we get breaks on this thing?
We don't, but feel free to go because we can just swap in and out. I'm also gonna have to hit the head.
All right, cool. Because my office is getting super warm, and I've got to go turn my AC on because somehow it's really warm in my house right now.
Yeah,
all
okay.
Right, I'll see you in a minute, guys.
Put this whole thing on my back and just get after it, Let me catch up a little bit on chat while I'm running this solo here. Worth it says, it's nice to have a chill stream where the chat isn't blazing fast and you guys are dropping me some free strat nuggets. Really appreciate that, man. I hope we're not too strat heavy. I tend to fall into it when Matt and I chat. We haven't really caught up in a while, and I always appreciate his insight on the work that he's done with solvers, and also just kind of like having a different perspective than me, being a tournament guy, also being an online guy, things of that nature. And Chin and I can kind of fall down this path too, but he's been talking a lot about the mamacitas and taking flights to the Dominican and doing all this other crazy shit. So he's been on one, man. I can't keep up. Odyssey says, I'm a pleb. Can you explain cross booking to me? Yeah. So it would just be like, so say we do 100% cross book, and you and I are playing 2-5, and I win $100 and you lose $100. We would then have a $200 difference that you would owe me. So that's essentially how it works in a nutshell. Most people are cross booking for less than 100%. Some are cross booking for a way to make the stakes a lot higher for guys who are used to playing bigger buy-ins. Let's say that they are playing a 1K tournament and they want it to be a 10K tournament. They'll find somebody to cross book 10x of their action. So first is 100,000, and they ultimately ship it. The person that they cross book with would owe them $1 million. When you put it that way, it sounds pretty absurd. But yeah, you could do like small cross books. I've done a cross book in the big game. I did a 30% cross book with a 300K cap. So essentially, we were cross booking up to 100,000, and if either one of us were ever up 300,000 more than the other, it was just off. And I capped out and shipped that one. It was nice. Felt good. Felt real good. Just catching up real quick. Let's see. Silverlicious says, thanks for the stream, Berk. Greetings from Loveland, Ohio. My pleasure. I know Loveland. I went to college with a girl from Loveland. Katie, I can't recall her last name. Maybe her last name was Loveland, and she was just from Ohio. That actually makes sense. Daniel ships a small one on the right with King High.
All right, I'm back.
Welcome back, sir. Chance says, Berkey, Doug and Daniel live. Who takes it in the same competition? Depends on the volume. I do think Daniel has better live presence than Doug, but I don't know that really extends out to scale. Like if they have to play 20,000 hands, Doug's just going to get comfortable and he's just going to do well.
Yeah. Also, 25,000 hands live would take forever.
Torture. So speaking of breaks, it looks like Daniel's going to sit out. If you don't mind covering for 1 second, I just need to use the restroom.
Sure, that's all good. That's all good. Lily says, from Veronica and Chin to Berkey Hunt, you guys have the widest range, most fun watch party. I'm glad to hear it, yeah. What was the Veronica and Chin stream like? That must have been spicy. I think the word they were using in advance of that was spicy, right? So I'm sure that you guys had some fun for I'm sure you guys had some fun with them. We're enjoying the stream. The only factor missing is Chin's emotional commitment. And watching the pain when Polk was crushing was hilarious. Yeah, Chin is more of a character than either of us, I guess. Chin's more out there. Chin's more like more dynamic. You know, he's the one who's more built for being a media personality than either me or Burke. I think it was Ghost Pepper spicy. I've never had ghost pepper before, but I don't think I could handle that much spice. So I'm. Chin got grilled for standing up her bestie. Wow. That doesn't sound like fun for Chin. I mean, if Chin is going to get grilled on camera, I'm here for that, because he tried to give me a grilling when we did the vlogcast finale. Oh, ghosting. Even worse. Ghosting is worse than just standing someone up. Jeez. Oh, it looks like Daniel's coming back. But shout out for the people who made these graphics, man. I'm loving these graphics. I think that was Andre and his team. So shout out to Andre for making these. Like, I think someone said earlier in chat, this is the best way, the best, like, you know, way of transmitting online poker, or not transmitting, broadcasting online poker. And yeah, like it's hard to make online poker a dynamic thing, or an exciting thing, but I think we're doing our best. Andre is the GOAT. Andre is very much the GOAT when it comes to streams. If I had the money, I'd hire him to make my stream better, but I'm pretty sure I don't have the money. Pretty sure that Andre is way above my price bracket. Although when you're streaming on Twitch in your spare time, pretty much everything is above your price bracket, right? Like, not exactly taking out bank loans to fund my Twitch channel. But that's fine, you know. It's a casual thing right now. Did I play the WSOP circuit this summer? I didn't. I didn't play a lot this summer. I guess partly because I have been doing a lot of stuff outside poker. I haven't played a ton of poker this year. It's probably the lowest poker volume that I've played in the past, I don't know, long time. Ace says that he needs to miss school tomorrow so he can live stream a Fortnite event for his career. What should I do? Jeez. It depends how good he is at Fortnite. Like, if he's really good at Fortnite, I know the top Fortnite guys make a lot of money. So I don't know. If he's really good, maybe pack in school. Maybe just play Fortnite every day. I don't know. But he's probably not that good.
Yeah, fuck school.
Yeah. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you for the link in chat. Caleb got there too quickly for even me.
I am gonna play. Oh, I guess you're probably asking Matt Hunt if he's gonna.
I don't know. Main event on December 13th. Is that when? I thought it was this weekend. The .com one.
I mistook, or I misunderstood the dates. That was for the GG flight.
Oh, okay. Okay, so my answer is maybe. I don't know yet. It's tempting. What are your thoughts, Matt? I know the main event is going to be it's a pretty good one.
Yeah, I think it's a no-brainer. I'll happily buy up your action. I plan on playing it and streaming it.
Nice. Maybe I'll do that too. If you guys agree that you'll all come watch me instead of Burke, maybe I'll play it.
That's fair. How did last night tournaments go? Cashed the main for basically break even. Finished like 30th in the 1K, so like 15 out of the money. No bueno.
Oh yeah, flop set. I'm just reading that now. Yeah, I know. I'm just messing around. I know Chin is. Hey, Josh Kwan. Shout out Josh Kwan in chat. Welcome.
What up, Jay Kwan?
Busto says he'll buy action. A lot of action being bought.
I actually just got a text from Tom Wheaton asking me if I wanted to do any sort of promotional stuff for poker shares. Not poker shares. Sorry. U-Stake.
Oh, okay. Is he the U-Stake guy? Does he own U-Stake?
No. He just he sells packages. He owns.
Oh, I see. Yeah, I knew he owned Faded Spade. Like I thought that he had like other businesses in the poker area or something as well.
Yeah, no, he just does work with them. Like he sells
cool.
his own action.
Okay.
So yeah, if worse comes to worse, maybe we'll auction your ass off.
No, I think we'll probably be able to get me in there. It's the main event after all. It doesn't feel like the main event, but it's the best we can do at this point.
Yeah. So I missed how we got here. I could probably reconstruct. We do have a rip here by Daniel. Love to see it. Love to see it. You know, and I didn't really mention this, but I should say that he could easily be getting a little bit gun shy. He did run a couple river bluffs over the last couple sessions. One where Doug called with pocket eights, which I think was like fourth pair, and just picked it off. Daniel had a good candidate. He should have been running it, and it just failed. And then there were a couple other ones. Okay, see, like, yeah, here we go again.
Okay, wow.
So Doug will not be bullied.
Yeah.
Not that that's a bad call. I think that call is probably fine. I would have to see the replay as to how we got there. My guess is that Daniel 3-bet, Doug called. Probably something like, I would hope he bet 3/4 on the flop, if I had to guess. So if I had to guess how this plays out, I would bet he bet 6,000 on the flop, getting us to, no, he went with a small bet size. Okay. Then turn, he bombs. Call through again.
Yeah, it's close.
Yeah, I feel like having the jack is pretty negative. Having the queen of diamonds probably doesn't matter. It's better to not have the jack of diamonds for sure. That's definitely close.
Yeah.
Good line by Daniel. Really can't fuck that one up though, to be fair.
Right. It's really hard to fuck up ace king on king queen deuce 7 when you turn the nut flush draw.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe I would like to retract my. I'd like to see him bet big on the flop stance. Here's the thing: you can do either for sure. I'm just wondering how much he's following through there on that type of texture with a hand like 6-7 of spades. Like,
yeah,
I just don't think he's betting quarter pot there.
Probably not.
Yeah, like that's kind of like the way I start to think about it. Is like when we find ourselves at top. I don't really feel like I need to balance a size that I'm not going to be utilizing for the majority of my range anyway.
Yeah, that's probably fair. Although I wonder if at this point there could be elements of each player's sizing where they're maybe to some degree starting to get in their own head, where they're sort of anticipating an exploit that never comes really, that tends to happen when you play a lot of hands against the same player. It's very easy to fall into that trap of expecting the exploit to come or expecting the adaptation to come, and then sometimes it never does, and the strategy that you started out with could just be viable the whole way through. And I think that there's a lot to be said for like just putting your opponent in those positions where you don't play into their hands by expecting an adaptation before it's even happened. You kind of have to force them to actually do things, actually do the adaptation, actually make the change.
I think there's maybe a part of him too that doesn't want to lose Doug on that particular texture. So like it is a two-tone board, so he's gonna have fewer peels. You don't really want to set a bad price to the 8-9 with the backdoor. And his particular candidate does block a lot of Doug's continues. He has a king, he has backdoor diamonds covered. It makes a lot of sense to be betting small in that spot.
Yeah.
I think like choosing a hand like ace king of clubs to go larger and then just choosing ace king of diamonds to go smaller is a pretty simple example of how to differentiate that spot maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I think that it's funny because you can make an argument for going the other way in terms of sizing larger when you have the backdoor, but at the same time, it also the logic applies in the sense of when you have the backdoor, you don't need to condense the SPR so much, right? So like you have different options depending on how you think rivers and turns might end up playing out, and I think that the EV difference between the two is likely to be fairly minimal. So it probably is kind of a case where it sort of depends on what he plans to do with the rest of his strategy, I guess.
Yeah, because it does make sense to choose that size with like ace queen. It does make sense to choose that size perhaps with jacks or tens, but it also makes sense to mix in a little bit of checking. So like, yeah, we don't really know what's going on here. There's a lot of bobbing and weaving taking place.
There is, yeah. So here's a question for you. You've played with both these guys live. I presume you've also played with both these guys online at some point or another.
I've never played with Doug online.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But either way, which one of these two guys do you think has the better mental game? Or which one is less likely to make mistakes as a product of
it's Doug,
deterioration in performance?
It's Doug, but not because I think that like he's super mentally strong.
Uh-huh.
It's because I think that his strategy is more
constructed.
Wow. Fascinating. Can we replay that, please?
Wow.
I'm pretty sure that was a single raise pot where Daniel donked the turn after check calling flop.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think Daniel's strategy is probably a little bit more, Doug's strategy is a little bit more of subconscious competence. Or unconscious competence, where for Daniel, he has to think through this a lot more. And that's fatiguing. It also allows emotion to creep its way in. Doug's just pretty unemotional. He just doesn't give a shit. Right? It's just like he doesn't doubt himself in any of these spots. And I know what it's like to be Daniel and like be very good at something, but also like have to play catch up and start learning a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You just have doubts because like you're not precise yet. You're not there. Good. Sorry, Andre. I'm paying attention. So we see check call flop like I thought, and then Daniel donk bets for 2 blinds. Doug goes with a big raise. Daniel calls. River 10. I'm kind of interested by Doug's choice on the river.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I suppose it comes down to he has the nut low and he has to have bluffs. So, like,
I understand the bluff for sure.
Yeah,
I don't understand the sizing necessarily.
What sizing did he make it? He made it.
He bet 60% on river, give or take.
Okay.
Well, the whole line's a little wonky.
It's very wonky because the lead on the turn is not necessarily especially applicable to that kind of a spot, because on the one hand, you'd think, yeah, on this board, okay, board pairing turn, out of position player can lead some frequency. It happens a lot, but like it doesn't happen as much in heads up because the out of position player doesn't have as much of a density of ace X in their check calling range when it's heads up. In that spot, Daniel's calling range on flop has a whole bunch of like king high and queen high and stuff, and he doesn't have that big of an advantage on the ace turn. So it's a lot harder for him to get away.
He's also not afraid of it going check.
Yeah.
That's the big reason to donk, is to incite action or set your own price or whatever the case may be. It's unlikely that you're going to freeze somebody. Like the idea there, I guess, would be that, Doug only, like Daniel could choose to do that, I guess, with like some hands that don't really want to check call but have to continue. Maybe like queen high, where Doug may exploitatively fold sometimes. And Daniel may also just get like pocket sevens to just freeze.
So James asks, why didn't Daniel raise river? It's cooler.
Can we run that back too?
What was the action?
I think they got in 3 bets on the turn, which seems pretty fucking aggro, especially when Daniel has the ace of hearts in hand.
That was a big one.
Yeah. Okay.
So let me talk about James's point there while you replay this. Daniel doesn't raise river simply because when Doug raises the turn, Doug either has an ace or a bluff, and then that means when Doug bets the river, he still has an ace or a bluff. But if Daniel raises the river, of course he gets called by an ace, which chops, and if he is up against ace 10 or quad fours, then he just loses, and there's no reason for Daniel to put more chips in through raising.
Okay, so on that hand, Daniel bet 75% on both flop and turn. He got clicked on to 12K on the turn. And just didn't have much behind, I guess. That's not true. He had 21,000 behind.
Yeah, and he only bet.
To protect him.
He only bet 1/3 pot on turn.
Oh yeah, sorry, you're right. You're right.
and he gets clicked.
Maybe he
to
thought he was
12.3.
inducing this, but like the thing is he doesn't get. I mean, there's a whole lot worse that calls. I guess just Jack X of Hearts. And he's obviously going to stack off on the Jack of Heart River anyway.
Yeah, that's a weird one from Daniel.
Neither here nor there. Yeah, I don't think the turn is a shove. I don't think I care for that.
Oof. Looks like Daniel just won another big one.
Yeah, that's huge.
That was a huge one. Holy crap.
Wow, what a big call for Doug. Wow.
Let's replay that one. That was a huge one.
So I only saw the river action. I'm guessing Daniel 3-barreled.
I only saw the hands. I just saw 8-7 and 10-8.
The pot was 30K-ish on the river, and Daniel shoved all in for about pot. Okay, so he goes small and flop. That makes logical sense. Turn, he goes huge. River pairs the board. He's all in. 10-8 seems like... Shove. Yeah, 10-8 seems pretty aggro, man. I think we'd rather have a queen in our hand.
I think we would, but at the same time, like, when we have 10-8, we unblock ace-queen, that kind of region.
Yeah.
We also block all hearts. We unblock any low hearts.
Yeah. We block 10's
like
full.
5-4 hearts. Nice. Like, yeah, we block 10's full. We block Jack 10. We block 10-9. It's tricky.
Well, 10-9's not really going to matter.
Someone says volume so low. My volume or everybody's volume? It might just be my volume.
You might just have to turn it up on his side.
Maybe.
Generally speaking, when only one person complains about volume, it's usually like the device that they're watching it on.
Yeah, I should try to remember that for stream. But like, I get people like, I've had times where I've been sitting there for 15 minutes. Like last week, I was sitting there for 15 minutes playing a game, and there was no game audio, and then nobody told me for like 15, 20 minutes, and someone was like, "Oh, by the way, I can't hear game audio right now," and I was like, "Why didn't you guys tell me?" You know.
Mine's the exact opposite. I'm on a 5-minute delay. Like yesterday, my mic wasn't working, so I just get spammed for the entire 5 minutes that my mic's not working. Like they can't see me because it's a delay, right. But it's just like they have to know that 5 minutes later, they're gonna see me like, I know. Yeah.
That's the beauty of just streaming games instead of poker. You don't have to be on a delay, you know. That's so true. I'm just interacting with people in real time instead of this weird delay.
Yeah, both those hands were pretty fascinating. I would be very curious. I don't think Daniel's ace jack is a shove on the turn. That I feel pretty confident with. And I'm unsure where that 10-8 ranks in bluff catchings. I'm more confident in the queen jack that he called with before.
Yeah, I think the most interesting
though, because like he has to call turn. But that 9 river I think is like very bad for his hand.
Right. I think the most interesting question is, which we'll never get an answer to, is did Doug call there because he believes that 10-8 is a good default bluff catcher there, or did he call there because he believes that Daniel is over bluffing that spot? And those are two very different scenarios, right? Because the latter, he could fully accept that 10-8 is a fold there against most people, but he thinks Daniel's over bluffing, so like he's just gonna call.
Yep. Yeah, that's interesting.
More people are starting to say volume is low, by the way.
There is certainly the availability for him to be over bluffing there. I guess he does have a lot of queen X for sure. I just don't know that Daniel, especially based on the way he's played rivers, I don't really know that he's taking a lot of like. Well, the thing is, I don't think he has a lot of like queen 7 or worse in his 3-bet range. And now everything else is like queen plus pair. And I just don't. Now, if he's bluffing queen 10, you're fucked because you're actually out kicked.
Yeah.
Which I don't think he necessarily is. You're just really reliant upon him having a lot of ace queen, ace king, and then like king X of hearts, I think.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Which is feasible. It's definitely feasible, but I'm a little sure.
Andre, I like that response from Andre right there. I have both on a very expensive audio board and monitoring levels. Check your volume if it's low. That's the "it's not me, it's you" response.
I like that. Feels good, man.
I'm guessing Doug thinks Daniel is not doubling very many 9x either, except those with straight draws. Yeah, I would probably agree, Josh. I think that a lot of the time there, you're going to see a lot of 9x check to turn, even some of the ones that do have the straight draws.
But to that end, he's still shoving queens plus.
Yeah, right. I guess it might come down to just what Doug thinks Daniel is doing with his ace kings and ace queens. Like if he thinks that Daniel's just like firing all those combos, then it might be easy for him to end up over bluffing there in that spot. Yeah.
Doug did block 9-8 of clubs, which would be the most likely 9 that Daniel would have. And he also blocked 10-9 of clubs, which would be another combination that would be very probable.
That's true, yeah. Interesting match so far.
Yeah, it looks like... I'm hoping one of these days we see these stacks get deep on both sides. This has been the trend where like somebody jumps out to a big lead on one side and the other one on the other. Right.
It could be very interesting here if Doug doubles through on the left table and Daniel doubles through on the right, and we suddenly get 2 tables of 200 big blinds deep. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure how accurate my math is, but I think Daniel's probably closer to 90 than 60. I could be very wrong, and I'm guessing I am because I think Andre's pretty on top of this stuff. But I'm just basing it off the fact that I was pretty sure Doug was in for the minimum on the right and Daniel's in for the minimum on the left, but I could be very wrong. I don't really recall.
The total stacks add up to about 190k for Doug and about 285 or so for Daniel. So that's suggest
what I was. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. But I could just be very wrong in the sense that Daniel may have reloaded a bunch more on the left than I remember.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. So Andre said Daniel's actually in for 215, so that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. Does make more sense. Jamin Burton in chat. Welcome, Jamin.
What up, Jamin? Moving out to Vegas shortly.
Nice.
We've made the decision that we're going to attempt to out Goggins one another.
Oh wow.
We're just going to run
One
around.
of you's going to die.
Yeah, for sure. We're just going to like start doing ultra marathons, screaming "Stay hard" or "Get hard" or "I have a boner from running so much" type of shit.
I feel like the screaming is unnecessary. If you're doing an ultra marathon, people are already very aware of how insane you are.
No, I mean, bro, you don't just run 100 miles and like not let people know it.
That's true, I suppose. If I was going to do that, I would want people to at least accept my...
Solid chance I would just have a megaphone that I breathed into while I was doing it. Just like...
So people could just hear you breathing.
Yeah, just so they know what I'm going through at the moment. Because let's be clear, nobody wants to do this.
Full-on Darth Vader by that point, but I'm not even sure you know that reference. You haven't seen Star Wars.
I do. James Earl Jones is a goddamn American classic.
Good. And so is Dave Prowse, who just died yesterday. He's the other guy who played Darth Vader.
Okay, I don't know who that is.
There we go. See? All my Star Wars fans in chat know who Dave Prowse is.
Shout out to all the... What do you call us? They're not
nerds is what you call us. There's no name for Star Wars fans except just nerds. You know,
okay.
We're just nerds.
My nephew loves Star Wars.
Oh, there we go.
I wasn't a big fan personally.
Were you introduced to it and then you didn't like it, or you just never really got introduced to it?
You know what? I was just super young. I watched Return of the Jedi. For sure, I saw that one. But the thing is, I was too young to follow the storyline.
Yeah, and if you saw that one first, it's not going to help because that's literally the last of the first trilogy. So it's not going to help to see the third movie first. So it's understandable to not get into it right away.
I mean, to be fair, I was probably like 5, and the other 2 were made, I believe. I think the first one was made in '82, if I recall.
No, the first one was 77, 79, and 83.
Okay, yeah. So me watching the third one, that was the only one that was made in my lifetime at that point.
Right, yeah.
The other 2 were made a little bit older, and I probably didn't watch it until I was like 5. I definitely, it wasn't like there was someone in my family who was so into it that like the trilogy was always just playing.
Yeah, that's fair. I kind of came into it by accident as well, to be honest. I think I saw Empire Strikes Back first. So like I saw the second one before I saw the first one, but then as soon as I saw the second one, I was like, I have to watch all of these. I was like obsessed with it. So that was my kid self. I honestly couldn't get into them, says Caleb. The plots are super confusing. All you guys, all you Philistines in chat not knowing Star Wars. Somebody help me out. Somebody educate Caleb about Star Wars.
What is Jamin talking about with Jedi being the third movie? Like, how is there a debate? They're made in a particular order, aren't they?
Yeah, they're chronologically made in a particular order, but Return of the Jedi is technically episode 6 of the story. So they start the weird thing about Star Wars is they started with episode 4, 5, 6, then they made 1, 2, 3, and then they made 7, 8, 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we somehow, I'm sure it wasn't meant to be this way. It's just Disney bought it and they were going to make 20 fucking Star Wars movies when it was all said and done.
Yeah, I mean,
George Lucas, I'm sure, designed the original 3 and then maybe the prequels.
He wanted that to be 9 originally, and one of the reasons why he sold Star Wars to Disney is because they were like, look, you're getting kind of old. You're probably not going to live to make 3 more Star Wars movies because right now, people were kind of scarred by the crappy prequel trilogy. And then Disney came to him and says, we'll give you $4 billion for the franchise, and we'll make 7, 8, and 9 that you probably would never have gotten to make otherwise.
Right.
And he said, okay, because when someone throws $4 billion at you, you pretty much say, okay, whatever, you know.
Wow, what an insane amount of money for a movie.
And you know what the craziest thing is? The craziest thing is he agreed to do the first movie. Like the studio wasn't going to say yes to the first movie. But then he said, I'll do it for free if you give me the merchandising rights. And imagine how much money the merchandising rights to Star Wars made. He made more money off that than he ever would have made from the studio actually paying him to do the movie. So,
genius. It really is genius.
It is. I'm just reading chat. What do we got? Caleb is a Trekkie. Oh, I'm a Trekkie too as well. I'm not.
My dad loved Star Trek. I fucking hated
it. Yeah, you're definitely not a nerd.
Yeah, hated Star Trek. Not for me.
What else have we got?
I like Spaceballs.
Spaceballs is good.
That's where I was at. Let's find the movie that spoofs all these things.
Yeah, but the thing is that you get even more of an appreciation for Spaceballs when you love the stuff that's being made fun of, right? Because nobody makes fun of Star Wars more than people who like Star Wars in most cases. Like, there's a lot to make fun of.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I also just think like Mel Brooks is a genius. And
of course.
That type of comedy is really great.
Yeah. You ever see Blazing Saddles?
Yep.
Yeah, love that movie.
Yeah. I don't remember the plot of it at all. I just remember it being very funny.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious. What else we got? What's more GTO, Berkey's Tinder game or Matt Hunt's PLO game? Well, my PLO game is pretty bad, so for your sake, I hope you win that equation.
I'm on point, man. Don't you worry about me. I'm doing just fine.
Robin Hood, Men in Tights, top 10 movies. Yes. When I was a kid, I went to a place where they filmed that movie. That's a weird story, but I'm English, so with the only movie sets we get are the weird, obscure ones. We don't get the big Hollywood sets. You know, no one gets to visit the set of a movie in England unless it's some weird comedy movie.
Sure. Don't worry, Jamie. I'm very consistent. I also don't know anything about Harry Potter and will never watch any of those movies.
We gotta get some talk about what's the show you love? It's Friends, right? Is your favorite show?
Oh yeah, it's
gotta get some talk about that.
I mean, it's one of the most culturally influenced sitcoms of all time.
That says a lot about America, right there.
What do you mean? Everybody can relate to Friends. You know,
everybody.
Six socialites living in New York City who seemingly never work and just hang out at a coffee shop all day.
Yeah, it's so relatable, right? You know, it's the vision of what everybody's experience of America apparently was in the 90s and 2000s. When
100%. You learn about everything. Hold on. I'm really gonna enjoy timing this person out. B. James, I would just like to give you a personal go fuck yourself.
Oh wow.
It's so enjoyable. He literally comments on every single vlogcast about how bad we are at poker and how good he is and everything else. But he watches every single
hilarious
vlogcast.
That's
it's
funny.
Insane. It's absolutely insane. I genuinely felt my heart melted a little bit.
I had some fun with some trolls on stream today. I got someone told me they were going to kill me, which was fun. Like
That's good for mental health.
Yeah, exactly, right. I had a troll whose screen name was Trump supporter 888 come in, and they managed to convince us that they weren't a troll for like the first 5 minutes, but eventually they started throwing out the random insults towards me for no reason and shit like that. So like, I feel you there when it comes to dealing with trolls. It's a practice in itself, I suppose.
Yeah. Honestly, it kind of is what it is, man. The internet is.
It's the internet, yeah.
It's a wild, wild west. I'm secure enough in who I am that I can handle a little bit of trolling. It's just like, to me, it's funny.
Yeah, I mean, I can handle it, but what I don't get is like, where is the fun for these people?
Yeah.
Like,
When I say funny, I mean like funny, not funny, haha, like funny, like ironic.
Oh yeah. I look at it and I'm like, how is this person getting enjoyment out of this? It's a weird thing.
Yeah, very, very strange. Like I couldn't have every single episode. We're talking about like 100 episodes of the vlogcast that this guy had, and he doesn't comment once.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, hon.
Comments a bunch of times.
Like 15 comments per ep.
Wow.
It's so impressive. I mean, honestly, like I'm not even mad. I'm impressed.
That's a line from Anchorman, isn't it? I'm not even mad. That's impressive. Yeah, that's a good line.
You made the whole wheel of cheese?
Oh yeah, that's the one.
I'm not even mad. I'm impressed.
Oh, that movie came out the first year I was in college, and that was I can't tell you how many times I heard people on my college campus quoting that movie for like 4 years afterwards.
Makes perfect sense.
Flopset says only fools and horses is the way to go, Matt H. Forget Friends. I agree with you there, my friend. Probably 99% of people in chat don't know what you're referencing, but I know what you're referencing, and I appreciate it.
Fair. Monotone river paired board on the left. Nothing interesting is going to happen there.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect too much drama. Looks like Doug made a little mini comeback on the left table to about a stack of 60K.
Yeah. It's funny, he never takes breaks. Daniel takes them like once every 90 minutes or so. Doug never takes a break. I don't know if he's like roaming around his house on a laptop or how he manages. I mean, the guy he can't get enough. He was playing Landon heads up prior to this match starting.
Mm-hmm.
They're like 10-20.
That's wild. Some people just can't get enough of that competition.
Yeah.
Well, you would know about that, right? I mean, you went from baseball right to poker.
I'm a detriment to myself.
In what way? Because there's a number of directions that could go in.
I mean, at a bare minimum, all of my relationships suffer because of my competitive side.
Well, that's not good. That's definitely not good.
Yeah, I mean, you know how it is. It's just, especially like my like friendships, like with guys. It's just always. It's not about like demeaning anybody or making them feel bad about themselves, but it's always a challenge.
Yeah.
Right. It's just like this challenging thing. It's like, even with Chin, like the whole idea of like making the fat loss bet. I wanted him to get better. I wanted him to better himself. I wanted, big things for him. But also, like, there was no point where I wasn't like in his ear of like, hey, you have 200 more days, and I'm gonna win this bet. Like just constantly reminding him that, like, I care about the outcome of this.
Do you think that's coming from a 100% healthy place, or is there a little bit of it that's like, I kind of wish I wasn't like that? Not to turn this into therapy, but
no, it's hard for me not to say it's healthy because it's what resonates the most with me. But I do recognize that not everybody is challenged the same way. Like some people can easily read that as just constantly being negative or whatever. But it's like why I like Goggins, right? It's like the guy's just raw as fuck, and like he's very, very quick to just like put it all out there and be like, I'm not good enough at this thing yet, and I'm gonna hold myself critically responsible to get better. So I kind of like see the world through the same lens, and it's not that I want to force that onto other people. It's just more so that like that's how I want to be communicated to. So I kind of reciprocate in that regard, I guess.
Sure, that's fair enough. I'm rereading some stuff from earlier. I don't know who Ultimate Training Academy is, but I don't know why they feel like they need to make that comment. So we'll just ignore that. They said, "Why do you both say the word like every other word?"
Oh, because
we're fairly sure we don't.
We definitely do more than I realized. Somebody pointed out to me.
Okay.
I guess it was maybe 2 or 3 vlogcasts ago, and I honestly took pride in the fact that I didn't think I said like very often.
Okay.
And I rewatched the vlogcast listening for it. And I'm like, oh.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'm gonna.
We're filling
that person's just made me super self-conscious about that from now on. So thank you. I'm gonna I'm gonna be watching myself every minute to make sure I don't say like all the time now.
Not me. Settings like this is chill. I'm not trying to get a gig on Sirius XM off of this.
That's true. Yeah.
I'm gonna fill the void with proper filler words like true millennial would.
It is kind of a millennial thing, actually. That's true.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I don't know what about our generation like popularized it, but yeah, somewhere along the line. Yeah, you know what? It probably had a lot to do with the fact that we were transitioning off of vocal conversation, right? Our generation was the first to really have computing power, and we began communicating via email first, and then eventually text messaging, and we keep transitioning further and further away from the spoken word. So I don't think for me personally, I wasn't really all that trained at vocalizing my thoughts. 3-bet pot here, 9-6 deuce, 2 spades. Daniel chooses the large size on flop. Goes with the 3/4 pot size again on turn. Should Doug call, this is going to put us at an awkward SPR on the river.
Yeah, it's going to be a weird one if he calls.
Yeah, it's going to be about 33K with 53 in the pot.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a rip card for Daniel for sure.
Kind of feels like it is, but tough to say.
Well, like, what do you do with tens?
I feel like you have to rip. I mean, how much ace high does Doug really have still?
I mean, he's gonna have ace 9 and he's gonna have spades,
and maybe he's gonna have ace 6 of diamonds. Yeah, I guess he has a fair amount. Maybe you just check with tens. Chance was asking in chat, what's in the cups? Mine's just water. I don't know about yours. I assume yours is water as well. Oh, yours is pre-workout, of course. Are you actually going to work out later, or do you just drink pre-workout casually?
Yeah, I drink 2 servings of it a day. One before I work out, and then another one like mid-afternoon, just to keep the caffeine spike.
I see. So just all the time is pre-workout for you, I guess. You're always before a workout in some capacity. It's just a question of how far pre-workout you are.
I'm just always geared up, ready to go. So Doug does shove here. I think his natural bluffs are going to be 7-8. I think he'll utilize.
Yeah. He has some diamonds and some.
It's tough. Yeah, but it's tough to find like what his worst diamonds and spades are. Because they don't really have a lot of relevant blocking, right? So 7-8 of diamonds or spades, 10-8. Jack 10, yeah, they all block around the 9, but Daniel's calls, I assume.
Ooh.
Wow.
Ooh.
God, that's so brutal.
That is brutal.
It just never ends. I mean, I think that's a clear call for Daniel.
Yeah, I think it kind of is. I think it's a really good shove from Doug.
Oh, for sure. For
sure.
I think that's a layup shove.
Yeah, it's definitely a layup shove, but it's the kind of content where not content. It's the kind of spot where a lot of players, particularly not in a heads-up environment, would find a rationalization to just check back when they river some showdown value, right? Like, I think the desire there is to, when the showdown value arrives on the river, it's like, oh, thank God I made some showdown value. I'm going to check, But in reality, in that spot, A7 is such a strong hand that it becomes pretty much mandatory for Doug to try to get some value out of it.
Yeah, I think Daniel can fold Jack 9 of diamonds probably on that river, but should be calling with Jack 9 of hearts. This might be the match. He may sit out. It looks like they're about even now. Yep, that's it.
That's it.
He kind of like tilt leaves whenever shit goes wrong. He was winning the entire session, loses a big annoying one. Honestly, he shouldn't be that upset about the A7 of diamonds. That hand's like pretty standard.
Yeah.
But I guess, you know what else probably led into it is the fact that they now would be 250 blinds effective on the left.
Yeah.
And I imagine to that degree, it's like he's even on the session, and now suddenly he has to play deep stack poker on one of the tables that he's been crushing all day. And then on the other table, he's only 100 blinds effective. It's got to be weird to run those counter strategies or strategies counter to one another. I don't have a lot of experience multi-tabling heads up, but I feel like playing 250 blinds deep on one table and playing 100 blinds deep on the other would be a bit of a mindfuck.
Yeah, it probably would be. It would require 2 quite contrasting strategies, or not necessarily contrasting, but just similar strategies but different at the same time on both tables, and it would be pretty tough to execute. So I can kind of understand not wanting to play those two spots at the same time.
Yeah. It's pretty unfortunate, and maybe that is a lot of what dictates when Daniel quits. Because he got his brains kicked in last session, but he played for like 5 hours. In a spot where like we were pretty sure that was just going to be, a wrap.
Mm-hmm.
But who knows?
Yeah.
I guess that's going to do it for us. Really appreciate you joining me.
No problem.
It was a lot of fun, man. We got a lot deeper in the weeds than I expected to. I think it might have been a little heavy on the strat talk, but that's what that's what we're here for. That's what we're paid to do.
But even if it was a little heavy on the strat talk, we still managed to talk about Star Wars. We talked about all kinds of other stuff. Like we talked about a whole bunch of random shit. So it's all good.
That is true. So it looks like it was about a break-even session for everybody. Possibly Doug may have won about 5K. Really appreciate Hunt joining us. We will be back for Wednesday's stream and Fridays. Christian and I will not be available since we'll be in Austin doing our thing. If you guys are in the area, don't forget to stop by. We are going to be having games all week long at Palm Social. Also, the day's last day that we have our merch on sale. The entire store is 25% off, so feel free to hit that up. Really appreciate all the support. Thank you guys for tuning in. And to be determined who will be here on Wednesday, but we'll see you then.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, take care, guys.
You should go now. Run. No, I won't leave you here. We can run together. Listen, if we run together, they will shoot us from behind. We both die. So, how's about you here? They will kill you. No, don't worry about me. I will hold them. I want you to promise me to survive, to take this message for our country.
See here, kid. You gotta just go for it. Don't think about what comes after or what came before. You just gotta bend your knees, take a deep breath, and jump. And you might think, what if I fall? Well, what if you don't? What if you fly?